Today is October the 17th, 2014. My name is Tanya Finchum, along with Juliana Nykolaiszyn. We're with Oklahoma State University, and today we're in Helena, Oklahoma.
That's correct.
To speak with Pat and Joyce Thornburgh. And we're actually going to talk about two different farms today. So the first one will be the Metcalf, William Logan Metcalf Homestead, and then the Thornburgh Farm.
Well, the whole thing is Thornburgh Farms. We've grouped it together because of farm land from both families.
Okay.
And so we call ourselves Thornburgh Farms.
All right. Well, let's start with learning a little bit about the Metcalf part. So,
okay.
How did the family get to Oklahoma and get to this?
My granddad was William Logan, and he made the run from Kansas, I believe from Anthony, and came down and staked this particular quarter of land because of the spring that flows in the creek down here, because the water was and is, very important. And he proofed it up as required and got the patent on it, and it's been in the family ever since.
Was he married when he came?
No, he was not. He married in 1910. He married my grandmother, who was 21 years younger than he was. She also came down from Kansas, but she was from Ohio, and I don't know how, from where they came from before that. But she was in the theater, and she was with a troupe. She had a sister that lived down here, was married to an Overstreet, and she came down to visit the sister who lived just 2 miles north of here, or eventually lived 2 miles north of here, but at that time she was living with my grandfather. Her and her husband were helping with the farming, and that's where my granddad met her. And I have a letter that he wrote back to his mother, or to his aunt, in Kansas, saying that you said you wanted to be here when I get married. Well, you better hurry, because I'm getting married, and gave the date. And so they married and had 5 children. They were all born here in this house. 3 of them, 3 of them were daughters. And 2 of the daughters got their degrees from Northwestern, teaching certificates. My mother, the youngest, she went to Phillips University for 2 years, and then went to East Central for a year, and then got married and didn't finish school. And her brothers, one farmed and went back into Kansas and farmed the farm that they owned up there before Granddad moved down here, and the other brothers farmed here for a while, and then they went off and had their own professions. And how we became part of this family was my dad met my mother in high school, and then he went to work for Logan after high school and never left. He worked for him and fell in love with my mother, and then my granddad died in 1947 at the age of 89 and a half. No, that was my dad. My granddad died at 81. I think he was 81 years old.
Right.
And my dad bought the farm from my grandmother in forget what year he bought it. But anyhow, he bought it from her with the understanding that she got 1/3 of the crop as long as she lived. And when she died, he still had a payment to make, which went to each of the kids, divided among the children. And from that, my dad grew the farm to 9 quarters. My granddad was a progressive conservative type. He owned the first pool combine in Alfalfa County, first case combine. I really don't know how much land he accumulated in his lifetime. I know during the Depression that he gave some land to neighbors because they couldn't make their payments and they wanted to farm, and so he gave them 1/4 of land. Each one of his children he gave 1/4 of land when they married. they got when they graduated from high school, they got the income off of it, and then when they married, they got the land, and he also built them a house or gave them savings bonds to the equivalent of what the house would cost.
Just like a dowry, more or less.
And that gave my dad a goal to own so much land so that he could give to his children. And my granddad, one of the things I remember my dad telling me my granddad said about farming is if you have a crop in the field, a crop in the bank, and a crop in the elevator, you'll never go broke. And that's true.
That would work.
And that's still true today, even though it's harder. But we have several crops in the bank, you know, mostly due to the oil boom. But we do have several crops in the bank at the present time. So, but there have been hard times, and through all of it, even my dad had to work off the farm to make ends meet at times. Worked in the oil fields, and always made his payments, always made his bank loans, and we've done the same.
So did Mr. Metcalf work off the farm too at any
No,
time?
he did not. He worked, I think he was, he was 21 when we made the run, and he lived on the farm his whole life, never worked off of it.
So if he was 21 when he made the run, and then his wife was 21 years younger, so he must have worked on the farm a while before you married?
Well, yeah.
Am I getting them mixed up already?
No.
Well, he made the run in 93, 1893, and he married in 1910.
Okay.
So
And,
17 years.
She was born in 1888, I think, 87. He was born in I think he would be born in 67, I believe. And, but no, he did not ever work off the farm.
Any idea what prompted him to make the run to begin with?
I think the idea of having some free land,
Okay.
because I'm not sure in Kansas that they had owned enough land that the family could actually live off of. But now he made the run, and you've talked to Mr. Metcalf up here, and that particular quarter of land, the fellow that made the run on it relinquished it the first year, and my granddad wrote to his mother and said, if you'll move down here, because E.L.'s dad was not old enough, if you'll move down here, you can take control of that land. And so his mother came down and his younger brother, and they then proved up that particular piece of property. And at one time, when my granddad first moved down here, he dug a dugout or cave and lived right down here off the road in the northeast corner of this section.
Until this home was built in 10. He came in 93.
And that cave was there for quite some time until it became a danger. You know, the walls started caving in on it, so we pushed it in. But that's where he lived when he first came, just built a cave.
His grandmother's name was Irene Gibson, Gipson. And that person that had moved in with William Logan was Fanny Myrtle, who was Irene's sister. And she was Fanny Myrtle, became an Overstreet. She was Fanny Myrtle Gibson Overstreet. And they lived with them for a period of time. But
Well, when he first came here, besides the dugout, what else did he build on the farm in those earlier days?
Well, built a barn, a machine shed, a brooder house, which we called the chicken house, but that's where, and then he had a chicken house, and had a coal house, and 2 granaries, and a wash house. And out of those, the only one not standing is the chicken house. The rest of them are still here, not in the best of shape, but they're still here. And the one thing that my granddad did when he was terrible at making cement. It was all sand, had no rock in it, and very little wire or anything else for strength. But every time he built something, he always wrote his initials and usually the date in it. And if somebody else was helping him, their name's on it too. And after I found out you all were coming, I went and started doing that, because I'd seen some of those, and I started digging and cleaning off some of the cement work so that I could verify that that's true, and on how old some of the buildings were. The latest ones that he built were in 1929, I believe was the last one he built. But he didn't write it in the foundation, it was always on the steps, or it wasn't, and every one of them had cement floors in them, instead of just foundation and a dirt floor. But the only one that's not standing is the chicken house.
Everyone considered him very progressive, and he was for that era. You know, he would put in the most modern things, it seemed, for that time. This house was supposed to be the first in Alfalfa County that had carbide lights. So we considered him a very progressive man.
The water that they used to supply the house came from the spring, and I don't know when that. I don't know whether it's before he built the house, probably after he built the house, but he dug a hand-dug well just to the north, or to the southeast of the house, and we're elevated from the creek by about 20 feet. Okay, the well, I think, was 35 foot deep, but he dug a trench from the creek to the house where the spring was and laid a pipe the full length of it with a sand point on the end of it, and so the water from the creek or the spring came to the well, and supplied water for the house with the windmill. And he was, the 2 cement tanks you see out here on the driveway that are now filled, that he had his garden to the east of that, and he built a underground irrigation system with cement pipe, and he'd fill those tanks, and then he'd open them and let water drain underneath the garden into an irrigation type, underground irrigation type system. And the fence, there's I don't know whether you noticed it when you came in or not, but there's a little fish pond back here to the side of the house. And he had a fence, there was a fenced yard, and the fence was made out of pipe, and water flowed through the top rail of the fence around and supplied water to the fish pond. And he just did things like that, you know. And I wish we could have preserved all that, but we still have the fish pond, but we don't.
The original.
The original, but we don't have any of the fencing. It all rotted and wasn't modern enough, you know. It had the old, wasn't hog wire, but ornamental wire fence and gates. We have a picture of the house, and my oldest, not the oldest, one of my mother's sisters said the house was as it was when we moved here, which is 2-story with a porch and stuff out here. But we have pictures of the house, excuse me, that shows that the south side of the house was actually an addition to the original house. And the floor out there slopes to the south, so that if the water overflowed in the washroom, it didn't flow into the rest of the house. And it makes it hard for carpenters nowadays to make anything fit. And
How do you think he learned how to do all that, or?
well, the house was built. There were 3 as a kid. I remember there was this house, Mr. Metcalf's house, E.L.'s house, and then there was a Dunsworth house, which is just a mile east of here. They were all built by the same builder. My granddad helped, you know, in the design, and he also helped build all of my aunts' houses, aunts and uncles' houses, his children's houses. But that was done by contract. This house was built by a contract builder. All the lumber came from Pond Creek. They had to haul it in here on wagons from Pond Creek because that was the only lumber yard at the time, and there was no rail service. But then the houses were very similar in design. You've seen Mr. Metcalf's house, and the Dunsworth house was a 2-story house built with a wraparound porch just like these are. And it burned in 1951. It was unoccupied at the time, but the Dunsworth house burned. But that's how then my father bought the land from my grandmother, and then My dad I have two sisters, and my dad put all the land that he owned in a trust and gave each one of us a certain amount of land. And that's how and then in 1972, my wife and I moved here and started farming in 1974 full time.
We moved into this house in '73, so we've lived here for 41 years.
And then when you were growing up, did you grow up in this house?
I was born in the Thornburgh Homestead, on the Thornburgh Homestead, and then moved over here in 1949. So I've lived here since 1949.
And he was born in '43, so he was 6
Yeah.
when he came here.
In fact, my uncle was a bus driver, and he'd pick me up that morning at the old place and take me to school. When I came back, he took me back to that place and let me out, and there was nobody there. And about, 20 minutes later, here the school bus came back, and he says, "Oh, I was supposed to take you over to your new house." And so you hear the stories about, the son being left and nobody being home, and where did they go? I tell that story.
Didn't tell
But
you.
I tell that story, but I knew where they were, but I didn't know they'd moved that day. But when I came home from school, I was supposed to come to this house instead of to the house I was raised in for the first 6 years of my life.
This is the original woodwork that was here.
All the windows and all that stuff is the original. We had to redo the walls because of cracking. It was old lath and mortar, and we put.
When we redid the walls, we took off 17 layers of wallpaper. They did not remove wallpaper. They just put it over. So we're lucky that there were even windowsills, the thickness of it, but we took off 17 layers. With a spray, we just wetted it down and scraped it off.
That's a history lesson in itself.
Yeah.
It was.
Time periods for each one of those.
And I do have pictures of upstairs, when we took it down to the floor, there was old linoleum under and all that kind of stuff.
They just put the rugs over it. My folks had just put when they put rugs in the house, they'd put rugs over the old linoleum and didn't take it up. And I remembered the linoleum, from seeing it when I was a kid, when my grandmother still lived here.
The things we have had to replace in 1989 and then again in '92. In '89 in particular, we had grapefruit size hail, and that's when we re-sided the home because it had the narrow wooden siding, and it just broke it all to pieces, and it broke most of the windows out. So at that time we replaced windows and re-sided. And otherwise it would probably be still wooden, because it was in good shape until it got broken.
So when would it have gotten electricity? Before you...
We had electricity when we lived here. I think we had electricity over at where I was raised in 1945.
Okay.
When we had electricity. And we didn't have running water over there. We had a cistern. They had running water here when we moved here, and when my folks moved here. And my granddad had running water. He had a pressurized tank, and the windmill pumped the water from the well, from the spring, and he had a tank overhead up on the windmill about 20 foot, and filled that tank, and that's what gave the pressure for water coming to the house. We didn't have, when we first moved over here, when I came over here and visited my grandparents, they just had an outhouse. They didn't have indoor facilities, let's put it that way. And but like my wife said, my granddad was progressive. He had some of the first carbon lights. One of the first to have electricity when it came around. He wasn't afraid of it or anything like that. He wanted to have it. But he was conservative. He made the comment to my dad that there'll never be a piece of land in this country worth more than $40,000. And Dad said the first piece of land I bought cost almost $40,000, and it's just gone up since then.
Very much up. I think it was in 1921 that electricity came to this house.
I don't think so, because I don't think it was.
I thought that's when
I
rural
don't think,
electricity
when,
came.
do you know when the rural electricity came? I don't think it was that
Sometime in
early.
the thirties, wasn't it?
Okay.
I think-
But I'm not
It
sure.
It may have been
either.
earlier than that we had electricity, but it's,
I'd say he got it as soon as he could.
he did.
Just
I bet he
As
for
soon as it was
saying.
available to him, it did. My, a little more history on there was a schoolhouse at the end of the driveway. It was called Timberlake Schools, District Number 69. And that's where my mother and all of her brothers and sisters went to school until the 8th grade, and then they went to Jed High School. My oldest aunt graduated from Northwestern, and she came back and taught 2 years at the school. And we have a picture of EL and class members, and she was their teacher. And that's the only pictures we have of that building that we've been able to locate. We're still looking for some, because it had a teeter-totter, a merry-go-round, and a slide. My dad gave all that to the Jet Lions Club to put in the Jet playground area, park, with the understanding that if it was ever taken out, that it would come back to the family. Well, 30 years later, people had forgotten what the deal was, and it got destroyed, jerked out, and I know where the merry-go-round is, but I have not been able to get the people to let me have it back. It's still like it was, just tossed out on the ground, not being used, but they won't give it to me. We'd like to have it, you know.
Just for the history.
Uh,
Rural electrification came at 35.
Okay.
Yes.
yeah.
Well, what kind of crops did he have in the early days?
Well, in the letter that he wrote to his aunt, telling about the wedding to be, he talked about oats and barley, and he was getting ready to plant corn, and it was very dry. He said we'd start plowing if it would just rain. And then on my father's side, we have letters talking about the Kaffir corn that they planted, and mostly oats and barley and wheat. And I make the comment that you can have one day you can have a very nice fine green field of corn, and the next day hot winds hit it just like they do now, and it turns to crispy brown. And we evidenced that this year in a lot of the crops, especially some of the spring crops. The milo, and you can just drive around right now and see some of the milo fields and some of the soybean fields that are just completely dried up, and due to hot winds and drought this year. And we had a terrible wheat crop
This year.
this year. That's how we came to live here. We raised 2 children here.
Well, then let's back up and talk about the Thornburghs.
Okay.
Thornburgh story.
The Thornburgh, they made the run. They came from this town north of Ark City,
Winfield.
Winfield, Kansas. They lived in Winfield, Kansas, and made the run. My great-granddad, whom I did not know, well, he was still alive, I guess, when I was born, but I don't remember him. Made the run. He already had a family of 5, only the 2 youngest were born in Oklahoma. And actually, the farm that I consider the Centennial Farm is not the one he homesteaded. It's the quarter right north of the one he homesteaded. And once again, whoever homesteaded it left. My granddad brought his sister down, Celeste Randall, and she took over the relinquishment. And part of the rules where you had to live on the land. So my granddad dug a dugout on the half-mile line, and so they both lived in the dugout on the half-mile line. So they both lived on their property.
Can you
They
imagine?
didn't have to build 2 dugouts. And we have, and then my dad's dad inherited that land when his dad Clarence died, and he married an Ackley, and they had 3 boys. But my dad's dad died at the age of 22 from a ruptured appendix, and my oldest uncle was 5, my dad was 3, and the younger brother was 2 months old. And when he died, when my granddad died, my grandmother got 40 acres of the land, and each of the brothers got 40 acres of the land in the will. And it took, I think when we filled out the original homestead, Centennial Farm, one of the things that, when I did the research on it, was my grandmother had 26 mortgages against that farm to keep it viable. Most of them were with the bank and jet or with other family members. And I just looked, and I still have some of those liens. $16. I think the largest one was $300. And but she paid them all off and was able to keep the land. And my dad then bought his mother's share, and eventually bought his brother's shares. And so when my dad started farming, my granddad Metcalf had given my mother a quarter of land, and then my dad had a quarter of land. And so they set up house in the old Thornburgh place, and from there he grew the farm to 9 quarters, which I own 5, and I've bought 2 myself, and my sisters each own. I own 3 that my dad had, and they own a quarter and a half apiece.
Well, did the aunt end up keeping hers that came down with him, his sister?
That's the one. I don't know exactly how my dad got that, or my granddad got that, but that was part of his inheritance. So I'm going to assume that maybe his dad bought it from his sister. I don't remember that part of it. All I know is in 1893 or 94, that's when she came down and took over the relinquishment of it. And I probably looked at the abstracts, but I can't remember exactly how it was given to my granddad. But we still farm it.
What kind of crops and things did he do on his land?
Well, they had, one they mentioned was Kaffir corn. They mentioned it a lot. Some of the early history of that family was, we have a picture of they lived in a soddy house for quite a while, and I forget what year it was, but my great-granddad built a 2-story house, and we have letters telling about the early years in the house and how it leaked in the prairie dog holes. Water would run in through the prairie dog holes, and they didn't have the new house completed. They didn't have the windows in it or anything, but my great-grandmother pulled the drawer out, and there was a rattlesnake in it, and she said, "We're moving today." And so they moved that day into the house, even though it didn't have any windows in it, to a framed house. And my dad's tried to buy the original homestead that his great-granddad was unable to get it bought. People just won't sell it. I'm hoping one of these days they will, but I don't think they will. They'll probably outlive me, so I won't get it bought. Mm-hmm. But they talked mostly corn and barley, and they raise cattle.
Where would they take their products to market?
Part of them went to Timberlake, the town of Timberlake, which was located just a few miles from here. Over there where you saw the cemetery, just north of that was the town of Timberlake, and it was in existence from 1904, I think, to 1912. And we have a paper here somewhere that lists that the price of corn was, the price of wheat was 25 cents a bushel, corn was 15 cents a bushel, and hogs sold for 25 cents a pound. And they had to take them to the guy that owned the local mercantile store. Said he didn't trade in money. He traded in chickens or hogs or whatever people brought, because they didn't have any cash, so they just bartered. And he said once a week they'd load up whatever they bartered for, take it to Pond Creek and sell it, and bring back produce for the mercantile store. And So that was the price of things back then. And the town of Timberlake disappeared when the railroad went through Jet and went through Helena and bypassed Timberlake. But Timberlake was on, they called it Timberlake because of artesian ponds that were there. And that was part of the Cimarron Trail, one of the stops for the cattle on the Cimarron Trail. And it got its name from a family that ranched by the name of Timberlake. And their brand is a TL, and that's the brand my father uses, and I still use for Laverne Thornburgh. It's ironic. That doesn't mean anything, but it's ironic that it's the same brand. But we went to church there. It was the United Methodist Church at Timberlake while I was a kid until we started going to Jet to school. We have the church, some of the history of that church. The first church burned after 2 years. It had a bell. You know, most of the churches in had bells. It burned after 2 years, and they rebuilt it within 2 weeks and put the bell back up in it. And in 1964, that church burned. And so they moved the church into the parsonage. And the bell was it cracked from the heat and from the fall, and they put it on a cement slab and put a plaque on the front of it that said, in memory of the pioneers of Timberlake Church. And somebody stole the bell, and they tried to steal the plaque, and my dad bought that little particular piece of property because my sister was going to live there. They were going to transfer the parsonage into a home, and but she got divorced and that didn't happen. So I'm the one, they started working on it, but I tore the building down and used part of it to fix things up around here. And then we salvaged the plaque. They tried to steal it and they broke it in half as a marble thing engraved, and we have it in our backyard. We took it over to Monument Place in Alva, and he cemented it back together for us. It's missing one little corner. But when they cracked it, they didn't want it. And so we have it.
We can show it to you later.
Yeah, we've always been Christian people. I grew up in the Christian church at Jet. She grew up in the Church of Christ, and when we married and moved here, we started going to the Church of Christ in Helena. We raised our kids in the church, and that's. I don't think I'm not sure my granddad Metcalf ever went to church, but he was an honest, good Christian man. But I don't think he attended church. But my grandmother went to church every time there was a meeting. And the school, when it closed, the Timberlake school down here at the end of the driveway, it became the Timberlake Ladies' Aid. And we had picnics, and they met once a month and quilted and did all those things there. I have 3 desks that I believe came out of that school. My dad tore that school down when I was in college in Arizona because of just deteriorated. And I believe the desks came out of that school. We don't have them there at the house, but we had fun times as kids down there because we went down there and played on the playground equipment when I was growing up.
You
For the
could
longest-
walk, you could walk there.
Pardon?
You could walk.
It's a quarter
there.
mile.
Oh,
Yeah,
just.
just
It
right
was
at
at
the
the
end
end
of
of
the
this driveway.
Oh, not far, sure.
It was called 2 different things. In one of the papers that I read, it was referred to as the Tucker School, but it was actually legally the Timberlake School District number 69.
And now the
One-room
local
school.
high school is called Timberlake. They assumed that name. And
Yeah.
I don't know how they decided on that name for the new school. But Irene, his grandmother, would make the lunches for all the school kids. It was a one-room schoolhouse through the 8th grade. And for the longest time, and then later she would prepare the lunch and take it down.
The 3 oldest brothers and sisters graduated at the same time, and my mother and her older brother, the 2 youngest, graduated at the same time. So my mother wasn't supposed to be in school, but she threw such a fit that they let her go, and so she was And then she and my dad graduated from high school at the same time.
And where would that have been from?
Jet. Jet.
And where did you go to Jet as
I went
well?
to Jet, graduated from Jet. See, it was, my kids went to Jet school until then they consolidated with Nash. And it was the Jet Nash schools, and then after they graduated it became Jet, Nash, Goltry, and Helena, and became Timberlake schools. Which is a good thing and a bad thing. You know, it caused some deterioration in the towns that didn't have the schools, and people lost interest in community things. And they still have a grade school at Jet, and the high school and the middle school at Jet, and the grade school and high school are in Helena. Nash does not have a school, and Goltry does not have a school now. And so those two communities,
Population really went down.
yeah.
You can imagine.
Well, when did the Timberlake one here on the property close? Do you
As a
roughly?
school,
Mhm,
I don't.
the school. Before you came, I mean,
Oh.
before.
We
well,
married
before
in 1967, and
Before I was
Even born.
even born.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what the I'm sure I could go over to Cherokee and look in the archives and find out when it closed. You know, EL graduated from it, and he's 84. He may have been one of the last ones to graduate from it. I really don't know.
probably the first time I came here was in 1965, and I can remember down there was a corner that wasn't tilled. They didn't really farm it because there were still cement stones from the school there. But then later, of course, that was cleaned up. And
And I think my dad tore that down in 68 or 69. But when we moved over here, they were holding Ladies' Aid, Timberlake Church Ladies' Aid, community picnics. And some of the things we did as kids, there was a Fish's Park. I don't know whether anybody mentioned Fish's Park, but just south of here, 2 miles, was an artesian well and a swimming pool. Nice cement swimming pool that the family had built, and as a kid, that's where all the family reunions were. And even when I was still in high school, I guess maybe 2 years after I graduated, which had been in '61, it closed because they couldn't maintain the health regulations that the state had put on them, and they couldn't afford to update it to do that. But as a kid, that's where we always had our family reunions and always had our picnics, 4th of Julys. We're always at Fish's Park, and that was the people that owned it were named Fish. The Fish family owned it, and they had the same type of playground equipment as we had at the school at the end of the driveway. In fact, I went down there to see if I could salvage some of it to repair and replace what we'd lost up here, and time had taken its toll on it. But yeah, that's where we always went. If we had a church picnic or class party, and we went to Fish's Park.
you can tell that it was a beautiful place, but by the time I ever went there, of course, it was just brambled up. Just was.
Yeah, and my folks went there as kids. It was there when my mother was young.
The smaller towns used to offer so much more to the kids than it does now. I mean, there were movie houses, there were all kinds of things to do, such as that being so local for rural kids. And of course now now in Jet there is a swimming pool for the kids, but it's sad to lose beautiful places like that, I think.
So when you were younger,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of chores would you have around the farm?
One I hated the most was milking. It seemed like I didn't really mind it in the wintertime, but in the summertime it was, of course there wasn't any aeration, it was just whatever breeze blew through, and I'd rather be on a tractor than, my dad would say, somebody's got to go do the milking. And we only had 2 cows, and later only 1 cow, but I devised ways to tie the tail of the cow back so that she couldn't swat me with her tail, and I hated that and I didn't hate it. I disliked it, but it was beneficial to me. We churned our own milk and separated her. You know, we had to separate her, and that was part of the job of milking. You brought the milk up, and then you went and put it through the separator and took the cream off of it, and kept the milk. The biggest challenge for me was keeping the cow from stepping in the bucket, and if she did, I sometimes didn't tell them. I just went ahead and separated it, and we had filters, you know, cloth filters in it, and so, but when we got to where we didn't use as much milk, I started feeding bottle calves, and that was part of my income as grade school and high school, was I'd buy buy bottle calves that had lost their mothers, and we'd buy them at the sale for, you know, $4 or $5 a head, and I'd raise them on buckets, and I got whatever they brought when we sold them, I got the income off of it. We had chickens. Part of my almost my full 4 years, in high school, I raised Leghorn hens and raised harvested eggs, and took them to the local hatchery creamery in Helena. I had to clean them, candle them, pack them, and then I'd take them down there and sell them to it. And that was my spending money in high school. To buy gas, if I got to use the car, and you know, that's the only money I got. My folks, you had to earn your keep. You didn't just. My dad just didn't give you money for things. You had to earn it. And we raised our own. Mentioned the brooder house. We raised our own broilers. Every year, Dad would buy 100 chicks, babies, 2 days old, 2 days old, and we'd raise those and butcher, and store those and freeze them. We canned our own vegetables.
Where did you freeze them and store them? Or was there a locker in town or whatever?
No, we had electric freezers.
Electric freezers.
And even when we moved back here then and started farming, we raised our own broilers. And we had a few chickens and geese and ducks, mostly for the kids, you know. And we always had big gardens. But when it became, you could buy food cheaper than you could raise it, you know, we quit. And she didn't particularly like butchering.
We used to, when we first moved back, we would always raise 100 broilers. And during harvest, of course, the main meal in the field would be fried chicken. And so every day, when those were big enough, we would go out and we would kill 10 chickens each day, because you couldn't process that many, or I couldn't. And I did that for years when we first were married. You wanted to raise your children almost the same way you were raised, because you think good ethics, you know, earn your money, that kind of thing. And so that's the reason we had a milk cow for a while when we were first married. We had the chickens, we had, like you said, the ducks and things, more to teach them the same thing that we knew.
I don't think my son ever milked a cow.
Brian didn't milk the cow.
Don't think he ever milked a cow. I think
You always did the milking.
I think I got rid of the cow before.
He didn't.
I just couldn't put him through what I went through. You know? And besides that, he was allergic to milk, so he didn't. The incentive to milk wasn't there because it made him sick.
But I used to can. You know, when we had the big garden, I would can for years, and then, like he said, you just started realizing it was not worth that, and quit doing it.
How would you butcher your chickens? Did you have a particular?
He would cut their heads off, but then I would pick the feathers.
When we first started as a kid, and I remember with my parents, we just cut their heads off and let them flop around until they bled out, and scalded them and picked them. And then I think actually I'm the one that came up with the idea. Well, why not? We had 2 pear trees out here beside the chicken house, and I strung a wire between them and put loops of twine on it, and then I'd hang them by their feet, and
it was as barbaric as it comes, believe me.
And cut their head off and let them hang there and bleed out right there instead of flopping all over and getting blood all over everything, and grass on them, and
more practical approach.
Yeah.
And to this day, though, fresh chicken, there is a totally different taste than what you buy in the grocery store.
Yeah.
It is much, much better.
But
It's
she
more
finally
tender.
reached the point that she didn't like
No.
doing that anymore, and you could buy them cheaper than you actually could feed them anyhow,
But
even though it wasn't as good.
It's funny because in this day and time, I have a niece that is raising her own chickens because of organic. She wants, and the health of it. So maybe it'll come back.
We still raise our own beef and butcher. I don't do the butchering, but we do. What beef we eat is homegrown, and that way we know what they're fed.
And did your parents and grandparents do hogs?
Yes.
Back in the
I can remember my dad when we lived over at the old home place, the Thornburgh place, that we had salted hog sides hung out in the granary. You know, and whenever Mom said, "Well, we're out of meat," Dad'd go out there and slice off some more. I can remember those hanging in the granary, the hams and the hocks and such.
Not a smokehouse.
Not a smokehouse. They were salted.
Did your grandmother and grandmother and mother belong to homemaker clubs? And maybe
my mother belonged to HD Club, Home Demonstration Club, and I think Joyce did for a while. My grandmother maybe belonged to Grange, but it wasn't like a home. But she belonged to what they called Ladies' Aid, you know, and they canned and made quilts and in fact we still have some of the quilting frames that she used. My parents were not big on keeping old stuff. You know, it was when they remodeled, they just, like the carbide lights and that, they were just tossed out somewhere and are gone. I do have a vacuum sweeper that belonged to my grandmother that had the bellows in them, stored. You know, I haven't looked at it for 20 years, I don't suppose. We had a press for squeezing grapes and such, get the juice out of them. It may have been used for rendering lard. I'm not sure. I know my grandmother Thornburgh made chitlins and such and made her own soap and such that way. And I know my grandmother did too, because we have some letters here or some memoirs that my aunt wrote that talked about making their own soap.
Extension clubs really have their time and place in rural communities. I belonged to it probably for 12 or 13 years, and it became not what I think it was supposed to be, in that we did so much for fairs and things like that it became a competition instead of just the learning process. And so I gave it up at that point. I didn't want to do that anymore.
We gave up the showing of livestock because it became more of a how much money can you spend and go out and buy the best instead of raising your own and showing your own, and it became something you just couldn't compete with. You know, it wasn't teaching the kids the proper thing. It was, we had families that even couldn't hardly afford to put meat on their table, but they'd go out and buy $1,000 steer, you know, to win. That's the only reason they do it, because
And that was the cost then, not now. It would be
Yeah.
much more then. Now.
Just to win. And we just said that's not teaching our kids the right thing, so we quit doing that.
But our son showed cattle through his senior year. I mean, we
4-H,
participated.
FFA.
FFA,
4-H, they
4-H.
belong to both 4-H and FFA.
And tremendous program. I
Yeah.
can't commend 4-H and FFA was wonderful. To this day, our son's 43 now, and works down still in Oklahoma. He lives in Chickasha, but he comments about how many people through FFA he knows statewide. That he'll run into somebody else that, yeah, I remember you. It's a good program on leadership, everything. Being able to speak in front of people, that kind of stuff. Good programs.
Were you in 4-H when you were in high school?
Yes.
So was I in history.
I showed hogs. I didn't show any cattle. And I didn't like sheep. They stunk. Even worse than, hogs might stink worse, but the oil on the sheep, once you got that on you, you just couldn't get it off. You know, on your hands or on your clothes.
I agree.
I showed them one year and I said, that's enough for me. It's not worth the effort. And I never did show cattle. I just showed hogs.
At the county fair or at the state fair?
Local county, and I went to state once. Took my hogs down there and they got sifted. Didn't even make the show ring, you know. I went out to lunch and I came back and went to take care of my pigs and they were gone. I said, what happened? Well, they got sifted, and when they get sifted, they go straight to market. And you don't get told, you just find them not there. And but I was on judging team, for FFA judging team. I tried to be on the meat judging team, but I wasn't very good at it. But I was on the livestock judging team for a couple of years.
And our son was too.
Yeah.
Went to state, you know, in the.
He showed at the district his last year. He kept wanting to show cattle, and I said, "Dude, you just can't compete." You know, but his last year I said, all right, if you can spend more than what the market price is, because that's all I'd let him spend on an animal is market price. And I said, this is your senior year. You can spend more on it, but just don't go overboard. And he showed a Hereford steer that took reserve champion in Enid, and he took it on to Oklahoma City and didn't even place. And he was so disheartened. You know, I was glad it was his senior year because he probably wouldn't have done it again. But that's just, I said, that's part of it. That's competition, you know. And one judge is totally different from another, what they like and what they don't like. And at that time, you could paint your hogs if the color didn't show up just perfect. You could paint them, or you could oil them down, and you could cut the hair. And now you can't do any of that stuff. It's supposed to be just on the quality of the animal. You know, you can't fluff the wool to make it look thicker, or you can't paint the hog, or you can't, and which is the way it should be.
Paint the hog.
Really? Paint?
If you had a Poland china and the black on the markings weren't just really good on it, you could paint them black.
You didn't want sheep polish or what?
No, just spray paint.
They used to have everything.
They used to, on white pigs, we'd powder them with white powder. You know, slap them in the ring and the powder would just fly off of them. They got to, I think the senior year that my son was in school, all the hogs had to be shaved, just down to the skin. You know, so they couldn't hide anything with hair. Same with the sheep. All the sheep had to be the same way. You couldn't block them. They had to be sheared so that just the animal, just confirmation showed you couldn't enhance or hide.
Did they ever go to the roundup in Stillwater, 4-H roundup?
You know, I don't remember. I think my daughter might have. I don't think my son did. He went to several, not leadership things, but like the Hugh Bryan Leadership Foundation in Oklahoma City. Went to that a couple of years, and was a mentor there for a couple of years after. He did that his junior and senior year in high school, and then his first 2 years in college, they called him, asked him back to be a mentor for the next 2 years. Rural education, you can't beat it. You know, individualized teaching. Yeah, you don't get the best teachers sometimes, but you get the individuality and more one-on-one time. So I think it's a better deal.
It was a unique time, and I think our kids grew up at a wonderful time as far as the education part of it goes, because I don't know, all of the parents cared immensely in our kids' class. I can't speak for the other classes, but I don't know, we were just so behind our kids in education. Our teachers cared about our kids, knew everything about them. If they did anything wrong, we would get a call saying, what's the matter with the attitude? Or anything, you know. If they did well, you know, telling us. It was a golden time, I think, compared to now.
We've talked a little bit about work. What would you do for fun? Besides going swimming at the
Besides
fishes?
going swimming?
Yeah.
Oh, as a kid?
As a kid.
You know, we made our own fun. We had certain willow trees that we would swing on, and of course we had the creek, and at that time it flowed quite a bit, and we even had fish in it that made their way up from the lake, because this particular creek flows into the Great Salt Plains Lake, up here, and whenever it would flood, the fish would come upstream. And the neighbor girl and I were fishing in our creek down here, and she caught a 5-pound salmon cat out of the creek, and we went up and put it in her tank. But mostly we created our own fun, you know, kids over. I had 2 sisters. We played out. We learned how to play outside. We didn't have the distractions of TV. I mean, we had a TV when they first came out, but the reception was so terrible you didn't watch much of it. But you learned how to entertain yourself, whether it be, and we had a lot more company as kids, you know, and other kids would come over on weekends. I had an aunt and uncle that my parents liked to play cards with, bridge mostly, and they had a couple of children, and we'd play football in the front yard in the lights, you know, or baseball or what. But we always found ways to have fun. We didn't have handheld computers and phones like this, and so you learned how to, you learned how to entertain yourself. And growing up, and I don't know how my father did it, but we took a vacation every summer for 10 days to 2 weeks, either to Colorado or to Wyoming. And since we've been married, and we have bigger equipment, not farming a whole lot more ground, but we don't seem to find time to do those things.
It's hard to get away.
I don't know why. And, well, I do know why. We finally figured it out. We do know why. We don't have any family left to look after the place while we're gone. You know, my dad always had uncles around, or we had close neighbors that would look after things. Now, I don't have a son here to stay if I want to go somewhere. I don't have any neighbors, any uncles or aunts or cousins that would do things for you, and it's just a whole different atmosphere. You can't find somebody that you really trust to look after your stuff.
Well, we don't have the relatives around that you feel comfortable enough to say, you know, watch this for 2 weeks, whereas his dad did. That's basically the difference. And yes, we do ask neighbors when we do go somewhere, but the longest we go really is for 4 days, and then you're back. You know, because usually there's cattle, there's everything else.
No cows to milk,
No
though.
cows to milk.
There won't be.
Got rid of it, no. Won't be another cow to milk. I wouldn't mind having some chickens, again, you know, raising, but she says, no, she just had a bad experience with a rooster. She got flogged, and she's having actually spurred her in the back of the calf, and she's having some real problems with that.
Mm-hmm. Not a good thing.
And but my daughter, she has chickens and ducks and geese and guineas, and for her kids.
Basically wants to give them the same upbringing that she had and we had. Just basics. Teach them everything.
I went hunting with my dad. He liked to quail hunt. I don't like to goose hunt because I remember as a kid him dragging me off to a goose blind and being just freezing to death, and the geese weren't any good to eat anyhow. You know, if the only time a goose is good to eat is as soon as he gets here from the north, because he's been eating corn and milo up there, and he comes down here and starts feeding on wheat, green wheat. I don't know whether you ever smelled or tasted milk from a cow that's been eating green wheat, or you can hardly stand the smell. It's
rancid.
It's rancid. And geese come down and feed on the green wheat because that's what they eat is the forage. And within a week, you can stand to cut one of them open. They smell so bad, and the meat will be just like that. Now, people will argue the point. They'll wrap them in bacon, and you know, there's ways to hide it. But I don't like to goose hunt because my dad froze me to death when I was a kid. And now my son likes to hunt. I don't deer hunt. I'm more of a nature type guy. I used to be a big fan of bird watching and photography, and I got so busy farming that kind of went by the wayside. But I do like to quail hunt. She gave my bird dog away a couple of years ago, so I don't have that now.
Long story there. We won't go into that.
But that's mostly what our recreation was or is. You know, just doing things around locally. We don't take vacations.
Well, what about holidays like Christmas and Thanksgiving as a young?
We overdo.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
good.
as a young kid, usually it was just family, the immediate family. We didn't have I mean, when you're talking about when I was a kid, we didn't have my sister's family come, you know, my mother's family didn't come in, or my father's family didn't come in. Every once in a while I'd have an uncle from Colorado that would be here for Christmas, he and his wife and their kids, but not very often. Usually they shoot up at harvest time, which was not a good time for my mother, because that was 4 extra people to have to take care of and feed, and she always resented that they showed up at that time. But now, you know, we try to get our family, our kids to come for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but then it was mostly just my immediate family. My grandmother, when she was alive, but outside of aunts and uncles, no. It was just immediate family.
And it's because the families got so large that their families would get together with their kids. But then when his parents were alive, we would certainly all congregate, you know, with.
Yeah.
So it was a big, and then many times we overdo on holidays. You know, we really, Thanksgiving and Christmas are fun and get as many here. My mother's still alive, and so there for a while they would come. It was whenever she could.
Yeah. As growing up, I mean, when my family was young and growing, my married family was young growing up, we'd always have Christmas, Thanksgiving at my folks' house. Or we'd have it out here and try to get my sisters to come. One of them lives in Washington, Oregon now. They very seldom were they ever here.
They go out and cut a tree on the farm?
We did. Myself and my wife and our family did, but my parents never did. We didn't have any on our farm to cut. We still don't have any on our farm to cut, but we had. You drive around the countryside, you'll find a red cedar somewhere, you know, that's along the road or in somebody's pasture that if you ask or don't ask, you might be able to make available. And we did that. We had a red cedar. And we always cut one too big. You know, we'd have a hard time getting it through the door. We'd have to cut it off 3 or 4 times before it even these high ceilings, we'd have to cut it off 3 or 4 times before we could get it in and get it set up. We did that till we found out my son was allergic to cedar.
Every Christmas he would be ill.
Yeah.
And so finally we put it together and he was allergic to that red cedar Christmas tree.
So from that time on we started buying our Christmas trees.
Yeah.
But yeah, originally.
Either get a spruce or then we eventually went fake.
Yeah.
But always green, never silver.
Yeah. But as a kid, no, Dad, we always bought a Christmas tree. We didn't go out and cut one. No, I think my mother's always went out and cut a tree. You know, maybe that's the only way you could get one back then. I don't know, but if we always had a Christmas tree right there in front of that window. And even as a kid, that's where we had Christmas, was in front of the window here in this living room.
And that was mainly to show when people drove up. You always had to have it where you could be seen.
We got a lot of visitors out here.
What would be the meal?
Thanksgiving, always turkey. Always turkey.
Turkey and ham.
It still is. Yeah. Christmas time, turkey and ham, sweet potatoes. My mother would always make pecan pie. She was a really good pie maker. Pecan pie and coconut cream, 2 favorite types of pie. And my grandmother my mother's mother was an excellent cook. And she might have 3 or 4 different types of pie. And she'd ask my dad, "What's your favorite kind?" He said, "What you got?" She'd name them all 3, and he says, "That's it." And she'd bring him 3 pieces.
We're very traditional as far
Yeah.
as the mealtime at Thanksgiving and Christmas goes.
In fact, we were just talking about that on the way home. What are we going to have for Christmas or Thanksgiving this year, Deb? are we gonna have turkey again? You know, I said, we could always have steak. That's my favorite meal, steak and potatoes. Chicken fried steak and potatoes, gravy, white gravy, chicken, you can't beat it.
And his cholesterol's low.
Yeah.
Works it off.
Probably about 5,000 calories a day.
She's tried for 25 years to put weight on me, and doesn't happen. Doesn't happen.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Didn't we talk about the buildings and things on the Thornburgh place?
There are none left there. The house, when we moved, my dad sold the house, and the house is still well and alive, I guess. It's in Jet. Family bought it and moved it to Jet, and it was known as the house that had the center of the roof cut out and upstairs built in. And that's just what it looked like. It looked like a normal two roofed house, and somebody went in and just chopped the middle out of the roof and set another little room down inside of that and put a roof over it. And it was not a very well built house. As a kid, I can remember, and I was only 6 when we left over there, but when the north winds would blow, the linoleum would actually ripple with the breeze. And like I said, we had a cistern for water. We had what we called, the same thing we called here, the wash house, out of building that. And I can remember Mother burning wood to wash clothes in a copper boiler pan, oblong. We didn't have indoor plumbing. We had a barn and a granary, and when we left over there, any time you abandon something, it doesn't take very long for it to go downhill. So it wasn't long before we had to tear down the granary. The big granary that we had that we stored grain in was a Army barracks that used to be at the Kegelman Air Force Base that my dad actually helped build, that air base. But it was just held together with cables. After the war, I guess they didn't need that stuff anymore, so they let people have it or buy it. I don't know exactly how Dad came about it, but it was taken down in sections, and then when you put it back up, you just cabled it back together, and that's what we stored. That's what he had the hogs hanging in, the cured hogs during the wintertime when we didn't have any grain in it. But none of that stuff is still there. The only thing left over there is a windmill.
How would you do bath time then at that place? But there's no indoor.
Just with the wet washcloth, and sometimes you got warm water and sometimes you didn't. Okay. I remember even here, when we moved over here, the only stove in the house was downstairs, and the bedrooms were all upstairs. And when we'd get up of the morning, it was always a race to see the first one downstairs get the prime spot in front of the stove, get warm, because we didn't have any heat upstairs. And it wasn't until I was in college that they actually got central air and heat. Other than that, it was just a propane gas stove, and only had one in the living room and one here where this clock sits. And that's the only 2 stoves they had in the house. Now, my grandmother had, I remember, she had they burned coal, and a big pot-bellied stove, I remember that. My granddad, when I knew him, I only knew him for 5 years. He died of Bright's disease, but he was in his 80s. And I have a picture of him here just before he died, but he was not in good health, but he chewed. And the big living room in there was actually 2 rooms in, and one of them was called the parlor, and that's where he spent his time with the board playing solitaire. And my mother said she was the youngest, and her biggest complaint was she's the one that had to clean this platoon, because it sat there beside the chair, and sometimes he'd hit it and sometimes he wouldn't, so she'd have to clean up the mess. That was her chore every night, was to clean up that mess. we got here. Baths, when we first moved over here, we had running water when we moved over here, but an old clawfoot bathtub, that's what we bathed in. We didn't have a shower. And
Well, the first time I came here was in '65, and at that point, they didn't have central air in yet, because I remember that swamp cooler and a window back here going to the south side of the house.
yeah,
So it was sometime between '65 probably and '70 that they put the central air in.
it was not as, it was.
You know,
yeah.
that wasn't that long ago, and it's just the progression of it. You saying that they didn't have running water over there? I don't know as I knew that. I'm listening intently because I wouldn't worry about it, because his mother was such, your mother was very much like mine in that you could be poor as a pauper and feel rich. Being clean, I guarantee you those kids were clean. She would have just seen to it. I don't know how y'all did it, but I bet they were, because she was very particular. She was an immaculate housekeeper.
You know, when we first moved over, like I said, over there we had a cistern, and we collected water off that ran off the house, and it went through some charcoal, and then down into a well. And we had the old crank cistern that had the little buckets on it that brought water up and dumped them out. And we moved over here, we had this well out here, and every once in a while, Dad would say, or Mom would say, Dad, you need to clean the well, because he'd have a smell or a taste of the water. And so they'd go out there and pop the top off and look down in there, and it's about 25 foot down to the water, and sure enough, there'd be a snake or a dead frog or something down in there, and he'd rope himself down, or me, go down in there and with a bucket, and we'd take that stuff out, and then we'd drop chlorine in it, a little bit of chlorine in it, and life back as usual then after that, until it happened again.
You know, how different is that than today? Because we're on rural water system now, and we're shortly after we moved here in 72, 73. And even today, our neighbor will go in and break a line, and what do? The dirt and everything comes through, and they throw chlorine in it. And then it's considered clean. It's somewhat much different. No wonder our immune systems were wonderful, you know, because we were exposed to everything.
Yeah, I think that we had a lot less sickness then, I think, among the kids. And it's because we were exposed to everything. We ate dirt, you know, and had made mud pies and all that kind of things that they wouldn't even think about doing now. And we didn't have all these genetically altered foods, and so your system built up antibodies to. But if you lived on the farm, you were exposed to a lot of stuff, you know.
Well, you ate
Cow
on
dragging
the
her tail through your
playground.
face when you were milking or whatever, you know. And
That darn old cow.
yeah, I
It
just.
keeps ringing around.
I hated milking those cows. I really did. Especially on a hot summer day, you know, and there was no wind, and you always had to go get them. They didn't come up on it. You know, you always had to go bring them in. Yeah, I hated that milking. That's the worst chore I had.
Well, did your mother have home remedies? Like if you did get sick or hurt? Or...
Now, I have to admit, as a kid, I had, I had what they described as, only thing I've been able to, my folks ever called it was red belly. That's what the doctor called it. And it hospitalized me. I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. And my dad said, there's nothing wrong with that kid. And he said, we're taking him home. The doctor said, you'll be back in 2 days. And sure enough, it's back in 2 days. But I had to croup a lot as a kid. And so I'd have to wear, even when I went to school, I'd have a dishcloth or a diaper wrapped around my neck, soaked with Bengay. I'd have Bengay on my neck, or I'd have Vicks vapor rub under my nose, you know, because yeah. But I would have in the wintertime I'd have sore throat all the time, and those, as far as home remedies, you'd have the custard if you got stung by a bee or something, you know, mother'd put the
So,
soda pad or wet soda, you know, and just put it over it to draw it out, or on a boil. What was it she did on we'd have a boil every once in a while, and she would heat water up in a bottle, and then pour the water out, stick it over your skin
to draw it out.
Because that'd form a vacuum when that cooled, and it would draw the core of the boil
I
out.
think it works to this
Does
day.
it hurt pretty much too?
Yeah, But outside of that, you know, we had the chicken pox, we had measles.
Stomachache, what would you do for stomachache? Not castor oil, I hope.
Oh yeah, we took castor oil.
We took cod liver oil,
Yeah, that too.
just for the health of it.
And to this day, she tries to sneak a fish oil tablet in for and no, doesn't work. Doesn't work. Well, as far as home, you know, not anything for anything serious or anything like that. But, like I said, as far as I know, the only really serious illness I had as a kid was that red belly, and that's the only definition was ever given for it. And my older sister thinks that's the reason I've never been able to gain weight, is because whatever that did to me at that time, because I was really young.
Oh, you have uncles that are built just like you.
Yeah,
It's genetics.
I have a real high metabolic rate. I can't sit still. I get this all the time. Whether it be in church or whether it be in a movie or whether it be in a doctor's office, it's you know, my hands or my feet are moving. Usually my mouth. I'm usually a fairly quiet type guy. For hobbies, I like to fish and hunt. I could go to the woods and be by myself and just be happy.
Well, what did you do after high school?
Okay, I went to Northwestern in Alva and got a degree in education. Went to Stephen F. Austin University in Texas, at Nykolaiszyn, Texas, and got a master's degree in biology. And that's where I met her. I was a student lab instructor, and she was one of my students. Couldn't wait for her to get out of my class so I could date her.
I got an A.
She was pretty smart. And the reason I went down there is because I had a professor, a biology professor at Northwestern that I thought a lot of, and he was going to take a teaching job down there. And so I made an application for the master's program and got accepted. And he got a teaching job offered to him at East Central at Ada, and that's where he's from. So that's when he took that job, and I went on to Texas. And then when I graduated from there with a master's degree, I applied for a doctorate degree program at the Arizona State University. And she was in a nursing program. She was a sophomore.
Finished sophomore year in
Finished
Texas.
sophomore year in Texas when we got married, and went out to Arizona State, and I was in school there for a year and a half, and we still had the draft, and the Vietnam War was going on, and at that time you could get school exemptions if you were in college, and so I kept making application for the exemption, and I kept getting them, you know, and she got into the nursing program out at Arizona State, into a new program, which was progress at your own rate. You didn't have semesters. You completed the coursework and they advanced you to the next level. And I got a draft notice and went through the appeal process, and I was 27 days from being 26 years old when they denied my appeal, and I got drafted. And they won't take you when you're 26. Once you were 26, you could not be drafted. So they got me like 14 days before. And there were 4 of us in the graduate school out there that got our notices all at the same time. And the physical at that time, when you went to do your physical, not to be selective service draft, like when you turned 18, you had to go take a physical. But when you get your draft, when you get your notice that you're going to go in, you take another physical. And at that time, they were wanting people so bad that I said I'd broken my collarbone when I was in graduate school and still have a big knot on it. And I thought, I won't be an infantryman because I can't carry a rifle because I can't carry anything over that shoulder. Well, to pass the physical, actually, if you didn't run into a doorway and you were warm to the touch, you passed. and soldiers were dying, that's in '69, they were dying pretty fast in Vietnam. And so there were 3 of us that we decided that we're going to join the Navy. We all had degrees, and they supposedly allowed you to pick the area that you would like to be in, and there was a water research that the Navy had going on at the time, and so we decided we were going to join the Navy, all 3 of us. Navy recruiter was closed the day we went, and we had procrastinated long enough that we didn't have but just a day or 2 to either sign up or be drafted. If you signed up, if you drafted, it was 2 years. If you signed up, it was 4. Okay. Well, we didn't want to just be a soldier, you know, carrying a gun. So we all joined the Air Force. And they allowed us to finish that semester of school. They put us on reserve, in the reserves until we finished that semester of school, so we wouldn't lose out on that semester. And we all joined the Air Force, and I went into the Air Force in '69. And I wanted to be a teacher and do research. I was actually really interested in birds. And for my doctorate degree, I was going to work on the life history of the Lucy's warbler, which is only found in Arizona and New Mexico and southern New Mexico in the United States. And I was out there 2 years, and I had yet to find one. By the time I got drafted, which was in January, I had finished all my coursework, and I had taken my exams. All I lacked was doing my research and dissertation, and that was the same with the other 2 that joined at the same time. And I went to San Antonio for initial training, and all that. Down there, then they also gave you a choice. You know, what would you like to do? I didn't know at the time whether it was actually going to be valid or not, because they put you where they needed you, basically. You know, but I took a test, and physiology test, and I passed it. And I sat at Nykolaiszyn Air Force Base for 6 weeks because they didn't know what to do with me, because I was the only one that had never taken the test and passed it. And I couldn't go off base. I couldn't do anything. I just sat there and did nothing all day long. They had no tasks for me. And finally, they gave me orders and sent me to Maine, to Bangor, Maine. She had quit school. No, she was actually still in school until that time. And we loaded everything we had up in a 4x8 trailer that I'd built, that we'd moved from Texas to Arizona in, and we loaded that up and we headed for Bangor, Maine. I was supposed to be what they called a physiological training specialist, which was altitude chamber work and training pilots on the effects of altitude. We got up there, went into the hospital, told him what I was, and the colonel looked at me and he says, "Physiological training specialist. What the H is that?" I said, "Well, it's altitude chamber work, training pilots." He said, "The closest altitude chamber to us is 900 miles to the south. I wanted a physical therapist." He said, "That's what my slot's for, physical therapist." And I said, "Well, I can be a physical therapist. I haven't had any training in this other. I can do on-the-job training." But I made the mistake of saying, You know, it's funny because 3 of the guys I went through basic training with were registered physical therapists, and none of them ended up as that in the Air Force. 2 of them ended up as orderlies, bedpan, what we call bedpan commandos, just being orderlies. And he got on the phone and he called Lackland Air Force Base, and I was sitting there. He says, "You come back tomorrow." And went back tomorrow, the next day. He said, "Where do you want to go?" I said, "I want to go to Phoenix, Arizona. That way I can finish my degree and my wife can finish her degree." He said, "Done deal, because you're not staying here." He said, "I'm getting a physical therapist." So we packed our trailer back up. We hadn't unloaded it much, but we'd packed up what we'd taken out of it and went back in the next day and got my orders. He says, "Can't get you to Phoenix." He said, "SAC will not release you." The base at Bangor was a B-52 bomber base. And he says, "SAC won't release you to Air Training Command. You have to stay in SAC." And so they sent me to Tucson. He said, "That's as close as I can get you." So we ended up at Tucson in the U-2 spy program, integrating pilots in the U-2 plane, their high-pressure flight suits, and did that for 4 years. Ended up in Vietnam, anyhow, but not with a gun over my shoulder. Ended up, and I wasn't there that long. I was supposed to be over there for 3 months. The most they'd ever send our group was 90 days, 89 days actually, because if you went 91 days, then you were classified as in combat zone, and they had to pay you special pay. And so they rotated you out every 89 days. Well, I'd been over there twice before, just ferrying planes over and bringing them back whenever maintenance was due on them. You know, they had to bring them back to the States. And that was the only U-2 base we had, was at Davis Mountain in Tucson. But it got too dangerous for the U-2 planes, because the day I landed at the Utapao Air Base, or Da Nang Air Base, there were 3 helicopters and 2 fighter planes on fire on the runway, next to the runway. And so they decided it was too dangerous for the U-2s, because there weren't that many of them, and so they moved us to Thailand. So I spent my 89 days in Thailand instead of in Vietnam, which I'm thankful for. But the service disrupted our plans. We moved to Tucson. University of Arizona would not accept Arizona State University's nursing program credits. And so she didn't want to start over again. And I couldn't get her to move to Phoenix and live with friends while I was gone, or for the 2 years or 1.5 years it would take her to finish.
Today.
Yeah, she'd do it today. If she didn't finish her degree, I didn't finish
Then
mine.
I wouldn't.
After I spent my 4 years in the service, did some time in Florida and in Thailand. It was only 2 times I wasn't in Phoenix. But our son was born in Arizona, and I got out of the service and I sent out 100 applications for teaching jobs in smaller colleges throughout the western United States. Got 1 reply back out of 100. We literally sent out 100. I got 1 reply back, and it was negative. The others didn't even respond. And the reason for not hiring was because of the war program, and the funds were not available because most of the colleges were using Science Foundation monies to support their science programs, and they'd cut that money all back because of the war effort, and so there weren't any slots available. And my dad was not in good health, and he said he needed help on the farm, and so I needed a job, you know, and so we moved back with the intention of helping for a couple of years and still looking for a job. And we were here, lived in my grandmother's house in Jet for a year, and I came out one day to go to work, and Dad said, "Oh, by the way, we're moving to Enid. You can move out on the farm." And I said, "Okay, but I really wasn't planning on staying here." And he says, "Well, you got a choice to make. Either you're gonna farm, because I'm leaving, I'm moving, and the house is yours, and I still hadn't had a prospect for a job in the teaching field. And I'd done my practice teaching at Enid High School when I'd gotten my my bachelor's degree, and I decided high school was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be somewhere where kids wanted to be, not where they had to be. And so in '73, we moved to the farm, and we've been here ever since. That's how we
And it's
ended up.
been a good life.
It's been a good life, but
Is
she
it?
didn't finish her degree, which we both regret.
Didn't make
'Cause
any difference.
that's one of the promises I made to her dad, that she would finish her degree, and but circumstances didn't allow that, and choices, didn't allow that, so she didn't finish it, which I regret, and I know she does.
Well,
But once she had a family's what she wanted to have anyhow, and I don't think she would have worked when the kids were young. Now, she did go to work because basically she had to in order for us to survive the farm.
worked outside the home for 18 years.
Yeah.
Just retired 3 years ago.
From what? From doing what?
I became the election board secretary of our county.
Which is ironic, because she hated history and anything
It
to
was
do
the
with
worst
government.
subject in all the world for me. Was anything civics or politics or anything. I never thought I'd go into that. Loved the job. The job was extremely interesting.
And it was needed in order to keep the farm.
Yes.
You needed to do that.
Well, while you were in the service, what was happening on the farm?
Well,
It was a golden age, actually, of farming.
my dad probably made more money in the '60s, but did more complaining because the government kept getting more involved in the programs. I remember him writing back and stating that you could only farm so many acres, or you could only raise so many bushels, and anything over that you couldn't sell. It had to be stored, and therefore a lot of black market wheat was going on, and the government got more involved in what you were allowed to do, and how much you could plant, how much you could harvest, and that hasn't changed. That hasn't done anything but gotten worse. And
He often said, had he not retired, that he would probably be in jail because of the programs that came out when we were young farmers. They started telling you how to do it, and so many of the programs even now are useless. Why do they do it? Why do they subsidize? It kept us afloat, don't get me wrong, a few years, but basically those programs were wrong. Still are.
they mandated that you do certain things. Soil and water conservation, they came out with guidelines, and they highly erodible land. Most of the farmers in this area that I'm aware of, it just bothered the heck out of them if their land washed or if it blew. And they were already doing things to prevent that because they didn't want it to happen. But when they came out then with the regulations that you couldn't break out any wetlands, and if you had pasture in pasture land, you had to get permission to break it out, and it couldn't be used for base acres. And I know one year I grazed this place off just east of me here, and it's highly erodible due to wind, because this is a sandy area, sandy loam, and of course when I grazed it off, you had to have so much tilth, so much organic matter on the surface of the soil, and I didn't have, because I'd grazed it off. I got a certified letter from the Soil Conservation Service stating that I had to plant rows of silage or hay grazer every 100 feet, and I had to run them east and west. And I went over and I talked to the director, and I said, you're considering this highly erodible. Do you realize that land slopes east to west? If I get a rain, the water's going to run because you're going to make me farm it east to west instead of at an angle, which is the way I always farmed it, so that the water didn't run straight up and down the hill. I said, regulations are regulations. And so I planted my strips. I tilled in between them. We got 3 and 4 inch rains. I brought him out here and I said, this is your program. Now, which was worse? Me trying to keep it from blowing or the erosion? He said, the guidelines are the guidelines. And I got pretty burnt on government involvement, and it hasn't done anything but gotten worse, since then. The new farm program, I have not found anyone yet that can even begin to explain it to me. You can't go over to the FSA office and ask them about it because they haven't seen the regulations. They don't have them written yet. But the deal of it is, it took them 2 years to get it. They can't explain it. Once you make the decision on how you want to go, you're stuck with it for 5 years. You cannot change it. It's locked in. You have 2 ways you can go. One of them's called ARC and the other one's called PCL, I think. And they had to extend the last farm program. I was against the subsidies that we got, because you got them regardless whether you had a good crop or a bad crop. You just got so much money every year. And don't get me wrong, I paid my taxes, I took the money. But it wasn't helping the farmer. It kept us afloat, and we had some really hard times because I wasn't carrying any insurance. My dad never did carry insurance. I didn't carry insurance. We lost in '89. We had the hailstorm that wiped out 7 quarters. I mean, the ground was as slick as this table. And the next year we had a drought. And out of 11 quarters of land, I cut 15,000 bushel of wheat. And and I was getting about a $44,000 subsidy from the government. But they told me I had to start taking insurance or I wasn't going to qualify for any programs because I'd had those 2 disasters, and they said, well, you got to, either the catastrophic the catastrophic program was just barely enough to even get your seed back. And so we opted to take but I talked to the banker, and he said, well, because I felt bad because I wasn't making any money. Farming wasn't making any money. And we looked at 5 years worth of history, and the only money that I cleared in that 5 years was the farm subsidy money. And my dad, through his farming operation, had managed to go from 1 quarter that my mother had, and the quarter he bought that he had 40 acres of and bought the rest of it from his family, to 7 more quarters of land he bought and paid for. And he asked me one day, he said, how come you can't improve yourself? And he said, and I did this, and of course he had a goal. He wanted to do what my mother's dad had done, left a legacy in land for his family. I said, well, let's look at it this way, Dad. When I started farming with you, we ran propane tractors. Propane was 2 cents a gallon. You paid it once a year. You didn't have to pay it every month. You went in once a year and paid it. I said, the newest tractor you bought, which was in 1965, he bought a G1000 tractor, it cost him $6,500. And I said, and you got $3.75 for your wheat that year. I said, it's now 1985, or 1980. I'm the only one in the country that doesn't have a cab tractor. I'm still using that 707, that G1000 that you had. I'm still getting $3.25 for my wheat. But propane is now 90 cents a gallon. Fertilizer is 5 times what you paid for it. And diesel fuel has gone up, and land prices have gone up. And I said, I bought my first new tractor only new tractor in 1980. It was a case tractor, 2390 with a cab. I bought it and a Schaefer disc. My brother-in-law had bought a tractor the year before, a John Deere 46 40, I believe it was. He paid $12,000 for it. The dealership offered him $15,000 to buy it back before he ever took it off the lot, because there was the demand. I bought my tractor the next year. It cost me $30,000. A John Deere tractor the same size that my brother-in-law bought the year before was now $40,000. Price of wheat had gone to $7. Price of machinery went up. Price of wheat came down. Price of machinery still went up. Until, when was it, 2000, wheat got up to $7 again. But most of that time in the 70s and 80s and 90s, wheat never got above $4. But the input costs kept going up. And right now, fertilizer costs, a pound of nitrogen fertilizer costs 54 cents a pound. When my dad put it on, it cost 7 cents a pound. Okay. We're still raising 30 bushel wheat. We cannot increase the acre or the bushels per acre because of weather. You know, the limiting conditions is heat and water. It doesn't make any difference how much fertilizer you pour to it or how good an operator you are. If you don't have the water and you have too hot of temperatures, you're not going to raise a crop, regardless of what the other costs are. Those are the two things that make farming successful: water and temperature. And wheat got up to $9, $10 even. That same $30,000 tractor now costs $110,000.
It's all imperative. I mean,
This combine right here in this picture, my dad bought new in 1961. He bought it off a rail car in Kiowa, Kansas. It was in parts. He and my uncle went up there to put it together. They spent 2 days just laying the parts out. And it's an Humphrey Implement Company. And the owner of the company come out and said, "Vern, if you'll pay," and he paid $820 for the combine. "Vern, for another $200, we'll put it together for you." And Dad had already been up there 2 days, and they didn't even have, they just had the parts laid out. 2 days later, he drove it home from Kiowa, Kansas, roaded it home from Kiowa, Kansas, put together. This article is in the Enid paper. My dad was 82 years old. Those combines were still cutting wheat. That was the last year that they ran. Not because they didn't run anymore, it's because they were too slow.
they didn't have a cab.
They didn't. They had 14-foot headers. But he mentions in this deal that he cut wheat from 61 until, what year was this? Until 2001 with those combines. And we cut all of our own wheat, anywhere from 750 to 1,500 acres with those two machines. It would take all of June into July. I watched a lot of 4th of July sitting on a combine. And at night you'd see the fireworks going off. Today, oh, by the way, that tractor I bought in 1980, brand new, was the last piece of new equipment I've ever owned. Until last year, or 2 years ago, I bought a drill, which was brand new. A combine today, just without a header, cost almost $280,000. You add the header to it, you got another $70,000 minimum. So you got a $350,000 combine that you use 2 weeks out of the year. You buy a tractor now. I've got 2 4-wheel drive tractors. I farm almost 2,000 acres, 1,600 acres of cropland. We're both used. One of them brand new cost $150,000, and it's one of the cheaper made tractors out there. It's a versatile, beautiful versatile. It's a good tractor. Don't get me wrong. It's an excellent tractor, easy to work on. But it's not a John Deere or a Case, so it doesn't have that brand name. So you don't pay that extra money for the green paint, as they say, because green does cost more. And they break down just as much, but they have a good marketing program, and green does cost more. But there's no way that I can make my mind wrap around the fact that I can go out and spend that kind of money for a piece of equipment and ever expect to pay it back, ever expect for that piece of machinery to pay for itself. That one combine that Dad bought was the only new combine he ever owned. I've never owned a new combine. I've got one that's it's a 1972 25-foot international combine, one of the first rotary combines that came out. I bought it for $14,500 used. Bought it from a custom cutter that used it to cut on me. And since then I've added another used combine that I paid, it's a 1989 international combine that I paid $22,000 for. And those are going to last me as long as I farm. By necessity. A new tractor, you can have $1 million tied up in equipment to just have the minimum amount of equipment you need to farm. I had a neighbor just bought a 50-foot cultivator. Cost him almost $60,000. He's 70 years old. He'll never pay for it with a crop because price of wheat right now is $5.51 in jet. And the OSU Dr. Anderson, OSU agronomist, predicts that for the next 5 years wheat's going to be below $6. I'm 71 years old. I can't find help. One of his questions asked about help. When I was a kid, my dad always had help. It was usually an uncle that lived in town, loved working on the farm. When I started needing, when my dad moved in, he came out and helped farm for several years. Always came out at harvest time until 2000, probably 2001 or 2. Well, this last year, 2001, he was 81 years old. The year before, he always ran a combine. Well, he ran the combine into the truck twice. So the next year I put him in the truck, because he was going to be here regardless. And when he came out from Enid, he stayed here. He brought a little camper out and he stayed here and for however long it took to harvest. Well, the next year I put him in a truck. Well, he came back. I serviced everything every morning. Truck bumper was bent back into the fender on one side. And I said, I had 2 truck drivers. I said, all right, who wants to confess to bending my truck? Silence. And finally Dad said, well, that'd be me. Well, what'd you hit? Well, I hit the elevator. And so I went up and talked to the elevator personnel, and he not only hit it once, he hit it 3 times. And so it became too dangerous and too expensive for him to be a part of the harvest crew. And so the next year I made sure I had enough numbers, and not quality, but numbers to help harvest. And I told him, he said, what are you going to have me doing this year? And I said, how about observing? And he didn't like that, but he understood, I think. He was bitter about it, but help is a limiting factor. 2 years ago, I did all the farming myself. I could not find anybody to run a tractor. So all the groundwork, all the wheat planting, up until harvest time, I did myself. Just like to wore myself out. Last year, I struggled to find somebody to even drive it, not this past harvest, but the harvest before. I struggled to find somebody to even drive a truck. And I finally did find a kid, and if I'd have given him another 3 days, he'd have torn every piece of equipment up I had. I would not allow him on a tractor. He wanted to work, but he couldn't take instruction, and he didn't care. And that's the problem. Most of the people want a job and a paycheck, but they don't want to do any work. And if you don't have a cab, they don't want to work. They don't care whether they show up on time. And now that the oil boom has hit, you can't compete with the prices. You know, the only help you can find are those that don't pass a drug test, because the oil companies won't take them if they can't pass a drug test. So the only thing they can do is manual labor. You know, run a tractor for a farmer, and I had a kid that I had hired that I didn't know was on methamphetamine, but he was, and as soon as I found that out, well, I found it out because he was doing weird field work. You know, instead of going around and around, he was making designs. And I asked him why, and he said, well, I felt like it. And I said, well, we don't do that. Well, he was high on methamphetamines. And my son is in corrections, and I said something to him about it. I said, I don't know. He said, well, does he eat a lot of candy bars? Because one day he had his shirt open and he had all kinds of sores on his chest, and I thought he just was allergic to something and was scratching it, you know. And I'd had a break-in at my shed, and the highway patrolman had come there that morning, and this kid was there, and as soon as the highway patrolman drove in, the kid got on the tractor and left. And the highway patrolman knew him. He said, and he had a drug dog. And he said, I'll guarantee you if I let that drug dog out, he'll hit on his car. And he said, but that's not what I'm out here for. But that's what was wrong with the kid, and he died from it. Not while he was in my employee, but a couple of years later. But you just can't find help. And I'm paying, for the first time this year, I hired a lady to drive a tractor. And I've been told, I'm on the co-op board, and I've been told by a couple of co-op directors that hire a woman. If you can find a woman, hire a woman, because she'll be more careful and she'll show up on time. Well, that's not the way I was raised, you know. And but I had the opportunity this year to hire a lady, and she knew. She'd been on a tractor before, and she knew what to do, and she showed up every day, and she was good help. But you have to meet. I had to pay $13 an hour, you know, and $5 wheat and all the other inputs. That doesn't work very well. And being the type of person I am, all I'd let her do is drive a tractor. I wouldn't have her fix fence or feed the cattle, or do what I consider manual labor type things, which she helps her husband do those things, but I just couldn't force myself to ask her to do those things. I think she would have if I'd asked her, but I just couldn't do that. That's not the way I was brought up, not the way I'm made. I still open the door for women and say, yes ma'am, and that sort of thing.
I would drive trucks, but I just never drove a tractor as a farm wife. And quite a few, I don't know, several around here do, but it's just one of those things. I'll mow the grass, I'll do all those things, and drive the trucks, but not drive a tractor.
Yeah, she wasn't a very good truck driver in the hay fields. She'd throw you off the trucks pretty easily.
I couldn't see the holes.
But my mother never drove, never worked. I can only remember her driving a tractor one time, and that was only after Dad had gotten hydraulics, and even I was too small to lift the levers on the old implements that didn't have hydraulics on them, because I never was very big. But she got balled up one day with straw, and she got off the tractor and walked a half a mile back to the house and said, I'm done. That's it. She never she never helped again. She'd drive a truck every once in a while, but she'd never get on a tractor again. And I never asked her to. That wasn't her role. She was the wife and the housekeeper and took care of the children. And you know, she'll make the comment, I was never around. Well, it wasn't because I was playing poker or fishing or hunting, that's because I was in the field. As a kid, the tractors were ready to roll when the sun came up.
You do hear so much of young people occasionally say, you know, their husband's not home. And I will just reply to them, look, you know, in the farming community, they're not home from before sun up until midnight, many a time, because of continual tractor work. So I don't empathize or sympathize with them very much.
I'm glad my children were raised on the farm. I don't
am
think they
too.
could have had a better, in this community, or probably any small rural community. I don't think they could have had a better, they could maybe had a better education somewhere else, but I doubt it, you know. They know.
They've done well. One has a bachelor's degree and the other has a doctorate degree, so they pursued. Our son will probably live here after us. He wants to move back and loves the rural area, but will he farm? He'd probably lease it out. He doesn't like to be alone. You know, he's not the temperament to be alone in the tractor that much, I think. Not that type personality.
I've reached the age, like I say, I'm 71. I've reached the age that with not being able to find help, good help, I've almost made my decision up to not farm anything except what the family owns, and I don't really know how long I'm going to do that, but I'll be giving up 5 quarters of land probably this year. It'll be my last year to farm those. I've got 3 grandkids now. I want to be able to spend time with them. I want to be able to form a hobby. I like to read, but I think that's a waste of time, so I need to find a different hobby. And but I want to have time for those. And I'm tired. And I haven't talked to anybody yet that can figure out the government regulations, and they're just getting so desperately bad that they call the farm program. They call the farm program the farm program, but it's only like 15% of it actually goes to farmers. The rest of it's all school program or school lunch programs and food stamps. The biggest part of it is food stamps now. The most money goes out to food stamps, but it's still part of the farm program. So when people see Congress has passed a $5 trillion or $1 billion, whatever it is, farm bill, they think, oh, those farmers, look how lucky they are, you know. But I've always contended that it should be on a needs basis, that not, if you're of course a lot of farms now are corporate farms. They're not owned by individual farmers, they're owned by corporations and farmed by farm people, but they don't actually own the land. I don't think they should be eligible for subsidies, because they're just using those as tax breaks. That's mostly what a corporate farm is for, to be a tax break for some big, large corporation. They farm to lose money, but they qualify for government programs because they're farmers. This past year, this livestock disaster drought program, I wasn't even going to sign up for it, mostly because first I thought, man, the paperwork involved in that, you know, you're going to have to show how many cows you had to sell because of the drought, or how many extra bales of hay you had to feed. My neighbor went over, and all I've got is 26 cows. My neighbor went over, he has 26 cows. He said, you better go sign up for the drought program. And I said, why? And he told me what they paid him. I said, what did you have to give for paperwork? He says, nothing. I didn't have to prove a thing. All I had to do was show them how many cows I had. And I used to buy my own stock of cattle and run on wheat pasture. That's a big part of the operation. That's the only thing that kept us alive, actually, was the cattle. The farming did not pay for itself. The cattle, if you didn't run cattle on wheat pasture, you just couldn't make it. You couldn't have made it. You had to. It reduced your yields for your wheat crop, but the cattle money was better than the wheat money, and together you could make it work. Well, when I got to the point I couldn't, I'd need 400 or 500 head of cattle to put on the wheat pasture. I just couldn't do that. Couldn't find the help, and I wasn't a good manager of sick cattle, and so I didn't like the have to borrow that much money, and always the threat of not being able to pay it back, if you had a disaster. So I started taking in cattle on the gain, and I developed, luckily, a rapport with the guy in Nebraska that sends me northern cattle, and we've had a good relationship now for about 12 years, and I take anywhere, depending on what the weather dictates, anywhere from 300 to 600 head. And for 3 or 4 years there, I was making more money on his cattle than he was making on them. And now, because I was getting good gains, and now a baby calf, less than a week old, costs $750 to $800 for a baby calf. This guy buys somewhere close to 6,000 head of cattle a year. And they're going to cost him almost $1,500 a head, just for a 450, 500-pound calf. The strain on my mental abilities to put out that kind of money and to lose one,
Yeah.
would just, I just couldn't take it. And that was one of the reasons I quit buying my own, because stress gets to me very quickly, and used to be I could drop 15 pounds in a week just because of anxiety. And one day I decided, I can't control the weather, I can't control the price of cattle, I can control the death loss, and I'm not very good at that. But there are so many things that I can't control. I gave that up to God, and I quit losing weight.
Found peace.
Yeah, I quit worrying about things I couldn't control, and it's been a good program. But this livestock disaster program, that was the biggest money giveaway that I know of in the farm program that the government has ever done. And I can't, because in my particular case, I couldn't run 600 head. I could only run 300. If they were going to be a disaster, it should have been on the number of cattle I couldn't run. Okay, because of the drought. Not on what I could, it was on how many I couldn't run. First they came out and said, well, if you didn't own the cattle, you couldn't collect on them. Makes sense, And so I turned my stuff in, and they told me over there, turn it in as fast as you can. We want to get you paid as fast as you can because they're going to sequester the money. And so we want to get you paid as fast as we can. Well, what about these cattle that I take in on the gain? Oh, you have to own them. Well, a month later, they changed their mind. You don't have to own them. You just have to have a contract stating that you took them in on the gain. But that contract has to be specific. Well, what are the specifics of it? Well, we don't know yet. Well, that's in 2011, 12, and 13. Okay. My contract is a handshake. Okay. I think everything that's required, if they ever tell me what the written contract has to have in it, I think is included in my handshake. First they told me it'd be 2 weeks, and they'd have a copy of the type of contract you needed, because it's going to be up to the local office, the local FSA office, to decide whether they'll accept it or not accept it. It's a month later, I still don't have a copy of the contract, and now I'm not even sure they're going to allow it. And part of the problem is,
so much of farming now is not just the labor of, it is the keeping up with the programs.
and part of the original part of that problem is when they said that you had to own them, the people that owned them took credit for them, and now I can't. Okay, and that's just not right.
Mismanaged program.
But when they can't even tell you what the programs are and what the regulations are, you can't even sign up for them yet because we've got a farm bill, but they haven't written the regulations for them yet. I got a letter the other day, or an email the other day, stating that I have until, I think, June 15th to sign up for the new program, but I can't sign up for it before November 15th because they don't have the regulations written yet, and the FSA doesn't have software to do it. But they have date specifics that you have to have certain things done, you know. But they can't explain the program to you. And if you go to FSA and ask them to explain the program to you, they won't because they're afraid they'll make a mistake. So it's left up to, I'm talking with a lady at OSU that is supposed to be a farm program expert, and she can't even answer stuff yet because they don't have the regulations all written.
How do you keep up with everything? Is
You
it
don't.
mostly online, or I mean, it just seems.
We get, well, keeping up with
Good
it.
question.
Keeping up with it and understanding it are two different things.
Okay.
Okay. They'll send out the deadline dates when you have to have certain things done.
By notice. That's how you get it.
I get an email. And, you know, not everybody does that. Some people, if you don't get an email, they're supposed to send you a letter. Now, this is from the FSA office. I get most of my information from my crop insurance people. I probably get 3 emails a month bringing me up to date on what they've found out so far. Soil Conservation Service, we had this, I talked about the highly erodible land. You signed a contract for that 15 years ago, or maybe 20 years ago now. It's never been updated. I've never received another thing about it, except if you're not in compliance, you don't qualify for programs. But they never come out and check. I've put in for terraces to be rebuilt or waterways to rebuilt. They've never come out and surveyed them. For 2 years now, they haven't done it because they don't have anybody in the office to do it. They can't compete with the oil boom, you know, basically. I mean, you know, if you can make $22 an hour versus probably a $22,000 salary working for FSA, what are you going to take? You know,
So the oil boom in this area has had a big impact.
it's had a big impact on several things. You can't find help because of it. Even the local co-ops are losing people, and you can't find. I've been on a director of a co-op now for almost 22 years, and we used to not have any problem finding help. You know, you don't get the best quality people, you know, but they know how to work most of the time. Then of course they got into, because the insurance, they all have to be drug tested on a random basis now, and that's mostly for insurance purposes. But you can't compete, the co-ops can't compete with the oil companies. We have better long-term retirement benefits, but it's not it's most of the people want the immediate gratification. You know, they can't think long-term. They go to work for the oil company for $18, $19 an hour. Well, the oil boom's going to be over with probably in less than 5 years. They can be on the co-op, make $14 an hour, get all their health insurance paid for, including their family, get a retirement benefit, get so many days of sick leave, so many days of vacation time, and in 20 years they'll have a fairly nice retirement program, and their medical bills mostly paid for. They can't see that. They want the money in the hand and they want it now. And I mean, we're losing our co-op. People we have our co-op right now are doing twice the work they ought to be doing, and it's because we can't find help. And that's the same things happen to the farmer. If you don't have a son here to help you, you're just about out of luck. Most of the families and there's several families around here that have become fairly large farmers, and it's because the families have stayed in the farming. I discouraged mine from staying in the farming because I didn't think he could make a living at it, and I didn't think he would put up with the regulations. And pride is probably what kept me in it. fact that we have 2 Centennial Farms, and my family's been a farming family. I have preached to my children, to my son who doesn't have any children, and he's going to get half of what I own. Do not sell it. Give it to your sister's children, and hopefully, you know, I won't care by that time because I'm going to be long gone, but hopefully they'll keep it in the family and keep at least a part of it going. Because heritage has meant a lot to me. It's meant a lot to my family. And it's hard to give it up. And
It's a deep-seated thing in a rural community. Once you live it, it just means a lot to you.
you know, and where I don't have anybody that's actually in the family going to farm, I've got a grandson that's only 2 years old that likes tractors and combines, you know. And so I've got a hope and faith there that maybe one day he'll live out here and farm the ground, but I don't know that to be a fact. But that's what you strive for, you know, that's what you hope for, that the legacy will just keep going. But like I say, in another 20 years, I probably won't care, you know, because I'll be gone. But it's just, I hate to see it disappear, and it is. It's becoming more corporate. And we used to have several hog farmers around here, but they can't compete with the big companies. And if the cattle business, if a cow could have a calf every 6 months instead of one a year, the cattle industry would be integrated too, and the feedlots would own all the cattle in the country from mama cows all the way through the whole system, but they can't afford to because it takes too long. Now, chickens and chickens and hogs, those are all integrated. They're all owned by Tyson Foods, is the biggest hog owner in the United States. And I don't know, I don't mean maybe chicken. Swift maybe, but they own everything. They own the sows, and the people doing all the work don't own anything. You know, they're just out there, and so they don't. To me, there's a pride in owning it and wanting to make it work and wanting, even if you have to. I couldn't farm some land because I was still using old equipment, and that didn't look good on. They didn't think that looked good on their farm. You know, for somebody to be out there without a cab tractor. But they don't own the farm anymore, and the people that were farming it don't farm it anymore because they couldn't make the payments on it. I was taught. My granddad was extremely conservative. My dad was, because that's who he learned from, was my mother's dad. Was extremely conservative. He passed that on to me. I don't get rid of it until it doesn't work anymore. Or you can't buy repairs for it. Those 2 combines, that when the day that those went off this farm, you could go out there and put a battery in them and crank them both up, and they'd run and they'd cut wheat. Because that's the kind of shape that we kept them in. And that's, I try to put everything I have in a shed, especially my combines and my tractors. I keep them in a shed. And that's what happened. That's the reason those combines lasted for 40 years, 60 years, I guess 60 years, because we kept them in sheds, protected them, and maintained them. And that's just the way I grew up. I didn't grow up with anything new, and I found out you could farm without having new. It didn't have to be bright green or white or red or whatever, you know, whatever color, because, yeah, John Deere people are John Deere people, but Case people are Case people too. It doesn't really make any difference what the brand is. If that's what you farm with, that's what you're proud of. But I saw a lot of farmers my age when they first started farming that thought they had to have everything new. You know, instant gratification, new tractors, new drills, new everything. And they're not farming anymore. And that's what happened to a lot of the, 15 years ago when we had a lot of bankruptcies in the farming program. That was the reason. Because we had good money. Wheat got up to $7, $8, $9, and they went out and bought equipment. But when wheat dropped to even $6, right now I think the break-even price on wheat in the farming operation, if you're buying machinery and having to pay for land, is $5.85 a bushel at 30 bushel wheat.
And what is the going price? $5.51 now?
Right, today or yesterday wheat was $5.51. you can't even buy one combine and make the payments on it and make it work unless you custom cut with it. And I remember, do y'all remember when they had the big tractor parade and the farmers took the tractors to Washington D.C. and paraded the tractors up and down the streets to protest the farm bill and the farm programs? You know, called the American Farmer Movement. I didn't join that movement because most of the tractors that went there were new tractors. They weren't paid for, but that's not what the people saw. The people saw new tractors, and they thought, oh, what are they complaining about? They're all driving new tractors. You know, if I'd have gone, I'd have taken my 707 that was already 20 years old. That's what I'd have been running up and down. It was paid for.
But yet, the conservative person wasn't gonna run those tractors up and down the road to start with.
Yeah, there were actually tractors that went from Oklahoma all the way on the road to Washington. Some in this area.
You know, it defeats the
Instead of
purpose,
taking-
you wear your
You
tractor
know,
out.
instead of putting them on a truck and hauling them there, part of the deal was to see them across America. You know,
There's a disconnect here.
There's a disconnect. There's so much of that. You know,
would I encourage somebody to go into farming today? No, I wouldn't. If they owned the land, they might be able to make it. But if they're having to rent the land and buy their own machinery, even with the government subsidy, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Because I heard a guy say the other day, it'll take, if wheat prices stay at $5 or below $6, it'll be 7 years before machinery prices start coming down. And you can't buy a $200,000 tractor and a $350,000 combine on $5.50 wheat. You have to raise 100 bushel to acre. 1 year on one farm, I raised 74 bushel to the acre. The year before that particular farm made 0 because of drought or late freeze. You just can't do it.
you can do everything right, and it still goes so south that it's
Well,
just unbelievable.
When my dad moved in, all of a sudden everybody needed a crop consultant. You know, that was a new avenue for somebody to make money, become a crop consultant. My dad hired one. I didn't know it. I didn't know I was going to be the one paying the bill for it. Okay? But the cost was 1 bushel of wheat per acre, the price of wheat on the 31st of December of that year, after the harvest. The crop consultant, he came out, he took soil samples, recommended what fertilizer you needed to put on. He came out and checked for bugs, whether you needed to spray or not to spray. Gave you yield estimates on 2 weeks before harvest. My yield estimates were 42 bushels to the acre. I lost 7 quarters to hail. The other 5 quarters that I was farming made 42 bushel to the acre. I paid him for 42 bushel an acre on every acre I farmed, not on what I cut.
Oh, what a ripoff.
And I told my dad, don't ever sign me up for something you're not paying for. And I said, I don't care how good the crop consultant is, how much effort you put into doing what he says to do. If it hails, or it doesn't rain, or it rains too much, it doesn't make a flip.
Mm-hmm.
The year my mother died, I got the best revenue I'd ever gotten in my life while farming. And it was all crop insurance.
Because it was a wet year.
I never cut an acre, and they gave me 0 bushels on every acre I farmed. Well, not quite every
That's
acre.
that year that it was so wet that you couldn't get in, and it
Even the guy
literally
coming out to-
rotted in the fields.
Even the guy coming out,
Direct opposite of last year.
the guy coming out to inspect the fields to estimate what the yield was going to be, would take one step into the field and sink up to his knee, and he says, "I'm not coming back until it dries up." And he came he was coming from Texas. He came 3 different times that harvest, and it was always too wet. And that's the first time my dad had been farming. He was still alive then, and I don't know, he was 85 or 6 years old, and he had never seen wheat sprout in the head. That year it did.
You know, it sounds
He'd
just,
heard of it,
just
but he'd never
listening
seen it.
to you when he says, "I wouldn't advise anyone to come farm." Don't misunderstand that. I mean, it's been a remarkable life, all that. There's so much left up to nature that, and it is a laboriously grueling lifestyle. You're literally, to make it managed correctly, you're always working, particularly with not health. And so, you know, to just say right out, I wouldn't recommend anybody to do this. Sounds very harsh, but would I recommend my son to come back and farm? No, I wouldn't either. There's too much work involved.
Well,
If you want to truly go on your vacations and relax when you do it.
And no guarantee.
You can't because
And no guarantee.
Yeah, well, and not only that, but like
No
I said
matter
before,
how
you
hard.
can't because you can't rely on the people that you hired to take care of it while you're gone to do it.
Yeah, you don't know how many times we've sat back and gone, I just wish that somebody could come in and help while we were gone, you know, just to have.
I had my knee operated on 2 years ago, and I hired a guy to look after my cows because it was during calving season. And he had cows of his own, so I assumed he knew what he was doing. I had never lost a baby calf in 15 years, I don't suppose, to illness. You know, I'd lost one to a coyote maybe, or to abortion or something like that. I lost 3 calves in 2 weeks, and I was paying him to take care of them. And he said, "Well, I never did see any baby calves on the ground." That's the kind of help you can expect now.
So it burns you and then you don't go.
But you can't. Like I said, if you have family farming where you can depend on family to take care of things when you're gone, then and they enjoy it. Yeah, I would encourage my son to farm if that's what I knew he'd like to do. But he's a gregarious guy. You know, he likes to go to concerts and do things like that, and you just don't have time. I don't have time. I don't think I have time. Maybe it's a matter of priorities, I know. But I don't think I have time to do those things.
And they don't have them in jet.
No, they don't have them yet.
You have to
Yeah.
travel. We went to Oklahoma City yesterday and we thought we'd never get home.
Even to go to Enid, I've got to go 36 miles now just to buy parts.
Yeah.
In any direction I go, it's 36 miles. And there's one John Deere house. Well, there's 2 within 36 miles. One Case dealership within 36 miles. That's it. We got to talk about daylight savings time. Farmers hate daylight savings time. We work from sun up to sunset regardless what the clock says. But when it's 5 o'clock in daylight savings time, it's actually only 4 o'clock. And you have a breakdown, you got to wait until the next morning to find somebody open. And you've lost 6 hours of sunlight, basically. Well, not 6, but 3 or 4 hours of sunlight because you can't go buy a part because they're closed.
Was there ever a time during your father's life or your time farming that you thought you were going to lose the farm?
Our daughter went through some ill health at one time, and monetarily, we dipped into our savings and had to pull monies that we really didn't want to. And that was really we had some tough years.
Well, we didn't, yeah. I refinanced. At that time, I bought 2 farms on 30-year loans through FHA and Farm Credit, and I actually had to go to FHA and refinance, and because I couldn't make a payment to pay the doctor's fees, to pay the doctor's hospital bills. Yeah, I didn't know whether we were gonna come out of that or not. And,
But I never actually thought we were gonna lose the farm.
well, that's
We would have
because-
managed
that's
around
because
that
you didn't-
somehow.
You didn't know everything.
Probably. That's probably
You know,
true.
and that's probably one of the things that I've done wrong, is I have not let her have those kind of worries, you know. I haven't told her, you know, you just can't go buy that, we just can't do that. Sometimes I've wished I'd told her that, you know, but I've had to borrow a lot of money, but I've never had to refinance a loan with my bank. I've always been able to pay it. I may have to take a new loan out the next day, but I've always been able to pay it off, and that's, not too many people can really say that. But we didn't do a lot of things that other people did, you know. We didn't get refinanced, and I had some neighbors and some friends that were gonna, I don't know whether y'all remember the farm credit crunch here a while back, and people got their loans written down, some of them totally forgiven. I had some friends that had bought $250,000 farms, you know, and they couldn't pay for them, and so they couldn't make their payments. Well, Farm Credit Service wrote them down, you know.
Forgave it.
Forgave it.
It was not fair.
One guy had to sell off his machinery to the bank, and he was mad because his neighbor, and he could buy it back. This is the sad part of it. He was allowed to bid on it and buy it back for half the cost of it, you know. And then he got mad at his neighbor for buying a piece of the machinery from him that he bought back at half price of what he owed for it. But on the land, we had some well-to-do people that actually got their debts forgiven on land, and within a month turned around and bought a $150,000 farm. You know,
That was in the 80s, wasn't it? It was
Yeah.
the farm credit
Right.
scandal.
I went back because I was buying land through Farm Credit. I'd never been late on a payment. I'd never missed a payment. I went and said, what do you have to do to qualify for this? You know, if it's fair for the goose, why isn't it fair for the gander? Why is everybody being able to write their loans down? He said, you've never been late, you know, or you've never missed a payment. And I said, well, that's easy to fix.
Yeah. I can miss payment. Tell
And
me
his
which
comment
one.
to me was, and we'll foreclose on you.
Wow.
You know, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know. But in that time period, there were farmers all across the United States going bankrupt. A lot of them committed suicide. It just wasn't fair. You know. My deal has always been, I signed the paperwork. That's my debt, and I'm going to do everything I can to pay for it. And if they end up taking the land, then that's what the consequences are. But when they started writing things down and giving people breaks, and they wouldn't do it for everybody, you know, that was just wrong.
It was just wrong.
I went to the Federal Land Bank and I told the board of directors what I felt of them, you know, and I didn't mince any words. And they said, it's the law. Congress has allowed us to do that, and you didn't qualify because you'd never missed a payment. And when you said, well, that's easy to do, well, we know you can do it. Yeah. This particular family that I was talking about that had their $250,000 farms written down and forgiven, and bought most of his machinery back at a third of what the actual value of it was. Every year he went fishing off the coast of Florida. He had a swimming pool in his backyard. I didn't have any of that stuff.
Well, but you could sleep at night.
That's true.
Have a pond, have you a pond?
Yes.
At one time, actually, we filled that in because we were afraid the kids would fall in it, you know. And now we have grandkids, we've talked about, but they get such a big kick out of the little fish that are in it that we keep maintaining it. But
Well, is there any oil going on your property that you have?
that's a really sore spot, and I'll tell you why. The oil boom made everybody around here healthy. Okay, when they started leasing, 1960 '78, I believe, I bought one of my grandmother's farms. It was when she died. The estate was settled, and one of her pieces of property came up for bid for sale, and I bought it. And I was the only one that bid on it. And I paid $120,000 for it, which was about $20,000 more than anything at that time was going for. But it was in the family, you know. And at that time, if a piece of property, a family's piece of property sold, and somebody in the family wanted to buy it, nobody bid against them. I thought it was too high, but my dad said that's what it's going to take, you know, to get it. So I made that bid, and nobody bid against me. But I had a neighbor who was not from here come up to me after it and says, "I don't know how you bought that so cheap." And I said to him, "Well, if you wanted it, why didn't you buy it?" And he said, "Well, let me put it this way. If I'd had the money, I would have." And he said, "I don't understand why somebody didn't bid against you." And I said, "Well, it's, you know, it's tradition and respect for the family." And he said, "I don't care if my mother would have wanted it and I wanted it, I'd have bid against her." And that's the mentality now of the younger generation. There's no loyalty. There's no loyalty to co-ops. You can go on the internet and buy anything you want to buy, and you can buy it cheaper than you can locally. But by the same token, when they need a tire changed or an oil change, or they want something today, they can't wait till tomorrow to get it, then they want the co-op to be there. You know. When I was president of the
That's
local,
what internet's doing to everything.
Yeah.
Our local stores.
When I was president of the board at the Jet Co-op before we became part of the Tacoma, we started having people, local farmers that didn't ever own anything but a bobtail truck. All of a sudden they're semis, you know, they own semis. They'd take their wheat straight to Enid and bypass the local co-op. Well, wheat is the local co-op's. Storage is the foundation of what they're based on. That's the only thing that keeps them alive is their storage income. And the same farmer that told me he didn't care if it was his mother, he'd bid against him. At that meeting, I didn't mention any names. I just said, there are those of you in our community now that are bypassing the local co-op. But you want the tire truck to be there, you want them to deliver fuel to the field, but you won't bring us your wheat because you can get a nickel more for it in Enid than you can get here. I said, in 10 years your co-op won't be here if that's the thinking of the new generation. And he came up to me and said, "You were talking about me, weren't you?" I said, "I didn't mention any names, but if you feel guilty, yes. You know, I am."
But it's how it's going to change the rural community, and is changing.
Well, oil, I heard, is driving up the price of land in this county quite a bit too. I can tell that's a sore spot.
Well, it's not a sore spot, but here's the problem with that. It is. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I started to tell you that there wasn't any land around here that was getting any oil leases even. Mm-hmm. I leased that piece of property for $18 an acre for 3 years. I thought I'd hit the mother load, you know, $18 an acre. 3 years that ran out. They drilled a well on this quarter south of me. They drilled a well on me right out here. The biggest check I got off of either one of those wells was $32 a month. That's the biggest check. Okay. Well, outside of the first check, which was a 3-month accumulation. Diesel fuel had gotten so high that at that time they didn't have injection wells. So if they were producing salt water, they had to haul it away. They couldn't afford to haul it away anymore, so they abandoned all those wells.
And this was what year? This was a while back.
Yeah, this was in the 90s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they abandoned all those wells, most of them. There are still peripheral wells around here that are straight horizontal wells that were producing $32 thereabouts a month for the landowner. Well, all of a sudden they did some thumping, you know, and wow, hey, we want to lease your land for the mineral rights for $250 an acre. Oh, you bet, right now, 3 years, it was $500. I paid off my land, paid it off early, paid off every debt I ever had. I felt great. They drilled a well on me. My problem is I've got 3/4 in one section. In fact, I own this whole section, but I don't have the minerals on one of them. My sisters, this is a mistake I think my father made when he divided up the land. He didn't divide up the minerals as an as an equal share. Okay, I've got, I probably shouldn't put this on there, but I've got sisters that have 80 acres, and they're getting more gas royalty off a well off those 80 acres than I'm getting off of 3/4. Now I've got a quarter of land just 3 miles north of me. They got $1,000 an acre for lease. I can't even lease mine. They're not interested in it. Land went from $120,000 an acre as an average to $325,000 an acre. There's no way, a quarter, with no minerals. There's no way on God's green earth that land is ever going to pay for itself. What happened was...
Unless they strike oil.
Unless they strike oil, like they have in the northern part of the county where they're making, some places making 2,000 barrels a day. Okay, you figure that up at $100 a barrel, and your share of it, you're going to be a multi-millionaire in less than a year. But people had money, and it was, and these are people that had struggled their whole life, and all of a sudden they had more money than they ever knew what to do with, and they've always wanted that piece of land, next to them, and they just couldn't. It came up for sale. Perhaps before, and they just couldn't afford it. Now they got money burning in their pockets. And some of these people are 75, 80 years old that are buying this land. The nice thing about it is they were able to pay cash for it. They're not going to pass the debt on to somebody else, onto their wife or their children, because they paid for it. But there's no way, ever, I don't care what the price of wheat is, they're never going to generate enough. All they're doing is hoping that land will be worth $500,000 an acre sometime, because it will never pay for itself. And I'll guarantee you they'll never take a crop off of it that will ever even begin to make the interest payments on it if they had to borrow the money for it. It just won't happen. And now, the life of these oil fields, these companies with oil at $100 a barrel, which has dropped down to 80-something now, I think, but at $100 a barrel or better, their oil company told me that they're going to have all this oil out of here in 5 years. They're going to drill that many wells to get it as fast as they can get it, because they don't know what the future holds. And so they're going to get it as fast as they can get it. They were supposedly, the plat I saw when they first started leasing this land, they were going to drill at least 3 horizontal wells per section. Most of us only have one, if any. I've got a quarter of land that is not leased now. I've got a sister that has a quarter of land that's not leased. In fact, this particular mile line that runs from just east of Goldtree or west of Goldtree all the way up through that same section line is a fault line. They drilled a well on it, and they found out that there's a fault, and so the formations aren't lined up. There's nobody in that section line that can get leased because they hit a dry well, one dry well. And the problem with that is the company that drilled that well didn't drill where they were supposed to drill. It took them 5 times as long to drill it as they were supposed to, because they broke the bit off twice, and they were in the wrong formation when they ended up, and the drill bit's still in the end of that well because they couldn't fish it out. That drilling rig, that particular operation, pulled a rig off, and they set it the co-op rented them the space to lay the rig down. That rig was laid down for 6 months because they could not get another drilling job. They ended up having to go to Texas because they were blackballed in Oklahoma because they messed up that well. But that mess up cost everybody in that section line least money.
Now, in the northern part of the county, of Alfalfa County, there have really been some nice wells.
You know, I mean, I've got a cousin that has 4 wells drilled on this place, and all within the last year, 4 horizontal wells on one section of land, and the best one's making 420 barrels of oil a day.
How has this increased production impacted the local community in terms of?
Well, you can look at in the paper, the sales taxes have soared. You know, the county workers all got pay increases. Even the laborers, you know, the ones out working on the roads, all got huge pay increases. She got out at the wrong time because you know, the people, even
Just
though
perfectly wrong.
the problem with her job was it was paid by the state, not by the county. But the county officials are probably getting, what, a third again more than they were before, at least a third more.
What about traffic?
The truck traffic, the road conditions have deteriorated something terrible. They've torn up more roads because of the heavy oil traffic, you know.
And our roads are narrow, as you noticed, and the trucks, you really have to be careful. My advice, don't meet any of the trucks on the bridges unless it's one of the newly widened bridges.
And, you know, it's
The
24
roads
hours a
aren't
day.
facilitating it.
The trucks are on the roads 24 hours a day. Highway 11 up here, which runs just north of Salt Plains, is known as the collision route of Oklahoma. There have been so many wrecks on that road since the oil boom. And so many deaths since the oil boom. And the sad part about the oil boom is that's just exactly what it is. It's a boom. And when it's gone, it's gone. And these people have spent money on infrastructures and higher salaries. And when it's gone, how are they going to pay for those?
We've seen that before, see.
You know, it's hard to reduce what you're paying somebody, especially at the government level. You know, well, in fact, it's almost impossible. You just can't do it. You know, it's increasing land prices. There for a while, you couldn't go out and buy a piece of machinery, even used, because it was bringing twice of what it should, because there were too many people who had money to bid on it.
It's brought in many that you don't know. You know, you'd know most people in your community.
I wouldn't let my wife ride a bicycle on the county roads.
Well, see, I used to freely ride my bike around, and really, you should carry mace or something with you now, even as secure as it seems out here, just because you wouldn't know them when they passed you.
I can't say since the oil traffic that I've had that one shed I have over here that nobody lives around. Used to be broken into all the time, but then I had where this Timberlake Church used to be. Their family moved in there, and since they've moved in there, I haven't been broken into. And I think it's just because there's somebody, you know, close that can actually observe the place. But there's been a lot more thefts in the country because of and a lot more bar fights, a lot more drug traffic. Because of the truck drivers all have to pass, drug tests, and most of the oil field workers have to drive. But drugs and drinking are not the same thing. There's not a test for drinking. You don't pass a test and not get hired for drinking. But you got to pass a drug test to get hired. But there's still a lot of.
But you look at some of the businesses, like I'm friends with the motel owner in Cherokee. They also run a restaurant. That has boomed, and it's certainly helped certain businesses.
And of course, they've raised property taxes. The oil leases is what allowed us to build onto this house. And like I say, paid all my debts, which is a tremendous feeling. Because I figured at the end of 30 years, it was going to be 30 years before I got out of those debts. But I was
We
able
will
to pay them
die
off
debt
early.
free.
hopefully.
That's a good feeling too,
It's a
isn't it?
good feeling.
And
Not pass it on to children too.
You
Pardon?
bet. And
Not
leaving-
passing it on to the children.
You bet.
I know, you know, my granddad, like I said earlier, my granddad Metcalf, I don't know how much land he actually ever owned, because he gave a lot of it away. During the Depression, he paid land taxes for farmers around that couldn't pay their taxes, so they wouldn't lose their land. He was a very, very nice guy.
He was a generous man.
Well thought of in the community, you know. And if it hadn't been for him, and a couple other people, and my dad wrote about it, that he'd probably been in jail, because my dad didn't have a father. He didn't even have a mother, because her new husband, the two older boys, he wouldn't allow them in the house, and so they had a rough life, let's put it that way. and my dad tried to go to college, went one semester over at Tonkawa and ran out of money. He wasn't a good student anyhow. He'd never hit. He knows it. He would never made the grades anyhow. But family meant everything to him because he didn't have one. He was estranged from his youngest brother, and I didn't know this until his oldest brother died, and I was riding in the car with him to Colorado for the funeral. And I made some comment, and I said, Uncle Wes, he made the comment, he said, you know, I didn't like your father and Wayne for a long time. And I looked at him and I said, why? He said, because I felt like they abandoned me. You know, I didn't have brothers growing up because they weren't around. And he said it wasn't until I became an adult that I found out it wasn't their fault. You know, I was the one that was lucky because I had a mother, and they didn't. They were raised by aunts, and not the same aunt. You know, my dad lived with 3 different aunts, I believe, before he got out of high school. And my father's side, we got a letter here. Family meant a lot. I mean, that was a huge family to begin with. At one time, there were 26 cousins lived within 10 miles of each other.
It's the reason they could go on vacation.
That's true.
It is. And now it's not so.
Got anything else? I've rambled on quite a bit.
I always like to ask, do you have a favorite time on the farm? Morning, season, whatever, time of day, time of year, favorite?
I love the fall. We used to have thousands of monarch butterflies stop here and just line the trees in the fall, usually in the month of October.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have maybe a couple of hundred, and I don't know whether you know anything about butterflies or not, but monarchs migrate to a place in Mexico, always the same area, and they used to take up 18 square miles of nothing but monarch butterflies, and now it's down to 4. And it's due to pesticides and, you know, all this. Her family's raised honeybees, and without honeybees we wouldn't have a lot of the food that we have because they're dependent on them for pollination. And now, you know, they're dying off with this disease that they have, and also we just read an article the other day that some chemical company in Norway, I think it is going to produce this chemical that has 4 times the powerfulness of it's an insecticide, and honeybees are extremely susceptible to it. And the honeybee people are trying to get it stopped because they got to have the honeybees to pollinate. That's just all there is to it. Most of the crops, flowering crops. But fall is my favorite time of year. Yes, favorite time of year. Mostly because I see a lot of bird migrations. You know, we have the whooping cranes come through here every year. I never see them going back, but they always come through, and we always have some. I just like birds, but I like the time of year, the coolness. It's not hot, and I know that I don't particularly like planting wheat because I wanted to get up. You know, like this year, we were so dry when we started that I didn't know whether it was, I mean, the soil was so loose it was actually flowing in front of your tires on the drill. It just looked like a wave in front of the tires. It was so powdery. And whenever it rains, you're always wanting rain, but you're always praying that it's the right kind of rain. You know, a 2-day rain instead of a 30-minute rain. And now we got, here the other day, we haven't had rain. We haven't had a runoff all summer. Okay, our rains have been a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, and they've taken all day to come. And so they've soaked in, they've been really good rains. But our subsoil moisture is so lacking that the creeks have never run. We haven't had enough runoff to even make the creeks run, flow water. And usually, you know, we've had maybe 5 or 6 times in the summertime the creeks would overflow and flood. We haven't had that for 2 years. We got 2.5 inches rain the other day. Creeks never flowed. I just finished up sowing wheat the day before, so I've been like this ever since. Every morning I go out and see, and we're going to have to re-sow. Okay, the problem with that is I planted Clearfield wheat. That's a wheat that you can spray for rye. It's $17.85 a bushel to buy the seed. I can't afford to replant it. You know, the downside of that is if I go plant some other seed in it, then I can't spray it for the rye.
Mm-hmm.
But the other seed I've got spoken for is $15 a bushel. You know, wheat's $5.51 at the market. You know. How does that make sense?
And so used to, we would keep our own seed wheat, and in this whole area, it's so infested with rye anymore because of whatever cause. OSU, please find out.
Oh, most of it is custom cutters. You know, more people started using custom cutters, and if they cut on the field that had rye in it, they didn't clean their combine before they moved to the next field.
Mm-hmm. So you don't save your own seed wheat unless you're going to graze it off, and
Yeah, I planted some of my own seed this year, but I cut it 2 years ago on a field that I'd grazed off for like 4 years in a row. And the problem with the rye seed is it stays viable in the soil for up to 7 years. And if it's eaten down, and I don't really know about soil movement, but soil's always coming to the top. You can bury rocks 10 foot deep. You know, foundation, you can dig a hole and bury them 10 foot deep. In 20 years, they'll be on top of the ground because of the soil movement. It's just a fact, it happens. And people went into no-till, thought, well, they'll have this rye problem solved because they can plant certain crops that are like the soybeans that are Roundup ready, and so they can spray with Roundup, which will kill the rye or wheat or anything else besides the soybeans. Anything that's green, it'll kill. They thought, well, you know, 2 years we'll have this rye problem solved. They've got as much rye now, even 6 and 7 years after they no-tilled, as they did when they started, because that seed is down in the soil and it's moving to the top. Earthworms, no-till soil has more earthworms in it, and so they move the soil, and they just can't get rid of it. So you started seeing more second crops, rotations, and canola. I planted canola for the first time this year. I've tried soybeans and I've tried milo, and I can't get a crop out of them because they're so dependent on the weather. My dad told me a long time ago, of course genetics have played a big part now, and they've changed. You know, OSU especially is working on drought tolerant corn and mostly drought tolerant corn. They've got, by chemically engineering it, gene traits. But he said if you try milo, he said the odds are 1 in 10 years you'll get a crop. And he's right. They've been growing it around here now for 10, 15 years on these rotations. And this year, if you planted it on ground that you didn't have wheat on, so you planted it early, you got the early rains and missed the hot weather, they got 100, 110 bushel. If you planted it after harvest, they're going to get 40 maybe. When I planted it, I got 30. I planted it twice. I planted soybeans twice, and I've never gotten a crop that paid for this year I'm trying canola. It's Roundup ready. You can spray it through the wintertime and get rid of and kill your rye that comes up that year, but you can only plant it on the same ground 1 year in a row, or you can't crop insure it. And this Clearfield wheat, you can plant 2 years in a row, and then you can't plant it the third year because you'll have too much chemical buildup in the soil that it won't grow. So they, 2 years at the most, and then you have to plant a regular wheat crop or some other crop, but you can't plant Clearfield. But at $5.50 wheat, you can't afford to plant Clearfield anyhow. And I planted it this year. Planted almost every acre to it. Because when I bought the seed, wheat was $8. When I spoke for it, I should say.
Well, I think that fall is certainly, right now, this time of fall is certainly the best on the farm, because usually you're about done or hoping that it all comes up, and you have a little bit of time off.
You can
Gets
slow
to
down.
relax some.
Harvest time is, I like harvest. I like the excitement of it. Man, I get tired. And
We have a dear friend, he's talking to y'all about retirement, but that made the comment, from 71 to 81 is pretty critical. If you haven't done your bucket list, you better be thinking about it, because how many really viable people do you see from 81 to 91? I mean, that really want to go out and do stuff. So if we're going to do things, that's the reason he's thinking about giving up those 5 quarters. We better be doing them.
Now, when she retired, she made a bucket list. And one of the first things on her list was walking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I could barely walk.
He had a
At
knee
that time.
replacement 2 years ago. I went,
At that
that's
time,
off.
And I've been asked, how many of your bucket list things have you gotten done? And I said, that wasn't my bucket list. I said, the thing that bothers me about her bucket list and that being at the top of the list, we lived in Arizona for 4 years.
Why didn't we do it?
Why didn't we do it when we
Little
were
did
out
we
there?
know.
But the top of my bucket list is something that I'll never do. But I want to go to New Zealand. Just because. The other thing I want to do is I want to go to Canada in a remote lake and fish. And why do I want to do that? And I've got the means to do it. I just don't have the time yet, or won't make the time. Because my dad loved fly fishing. That's where we went in the summertime. That was the vacation. My mother hated it because she didn't fish. She still had to do everything that she did when she was at home. She had to wash the clothes and fix the meals and all that kind of good stuff. But I learned to fly fish, trout, and I loved it. My dad always had this dream of going up there, and there was a local group here in Alfalfa County that every year they went, same group of men. And Dad was good friends with one of them, and they always go during harvest. And my dad came out one year and he had a suitcase packed, and he said, "This is my Canadian suitcase." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "I'm expecting a phone call." And he says, "I don't care what time of day it is or where I am, in the middle of the wheat field, I don't care what it is, I'm picking up that suitcase and I'm gone. I'm going to Canada." Well, because one guy had said he wasn't going to go. Well, he got to thinking about it, and he says, if I don't go, I might lose my slot, and I won't get to go next year. And so he decided to go, and so my dad never did get that phone call. And so he never went. And I said, it's not going to happen to me. I'm going to do that. But it's creeping up on me. I'm going to have to get it done. But, and the guy that went had a heart attack and died while he was there.
Oh, that's true.
That's a true story. And so, you don't know what's going to happen next year. So if you get those lists, you need to get them done.
You need to go fishing.
You do go fishing. I've got a pond down here that I used to go fishing in all the time. When my daughter was sick, that was the only place I could actually go and be able to survive, I guess, not be overwhelmed. I didn't care whether I caught any fish or not, just, I could do that, I could get away. Told her I was gonna go check the cows. I'd go down there and get on the boat and just fish. And I don't have kids at home now, and the pond's there, and it's been restocked, it's been rebuilt and restocked. I really don't have the desire to go down there and go fishing in it. And I don't know why. I guess it's because I don't have anybody to bring the fish back to besides her, and she has to cook them. And I don't have the kids. I don't have the kids to take down there and go fishing with me. But that was when my daughter was sick. She was sick for
Years.
10 years at least. That was really trying times with all the doctor bills and all the psychological things that went along with it. That was a tough stretch.
She made it.
And the pond was your happy place.
Yep. It was.
Well, a year from now, we expect a picture of you from
Fishing.
Yeah.
From Canada.
From Canada. From Canada.
The problem with that is I've told my kids that, and they both says, "You're taking us, aren't you?" They don't. I don't think I'd have them. The two, they're opposite. I mean, it's day and night. I don't think I'd have those two together for that long period of time, and it'd be a happy time.
Even at their age, probably not.
It'd be a happy time. I think they'd be at each other.
Well,
So
then you go
I
twice.
have to go twice.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Good reasoning.
I've already figured
I
that
like
out.
your
I have to go
reasoning.
twice. It works.
Anything else you want to add before we sign off? We've covered quite a bit.
Oh. One of your questions here, what do you do in the cold months? Well, I usually run stock cattle, so before we had round bales and had to feed little square bales, that was an all day, every day job, because you pick up a pickup load and go out and come back and get another pickup load. With round bales, life is so much easier. But stocker cattle in the wintertime has been a big part of our operation, and hopefully I'm going to have some wood pastures so the guy in Nebraska can send some more down. Because I enjoy that. I enjoy that probably more than any other part of the farming operation is taking care of cattle.
And still, that's with the handshake.
Yep.
That's a good way to stop. Well, thank you very much for sharing your stories.
You bet.